3 minutes after 10, and it is, I suppose, a mark of shame, perhaps, or certainly it's a little embarrassing that we turn our attention to a Scottish politician because she finds herself in so much bother, in so much trouble. You often tell me off for not paying a little bit more attention to matters political in Scotland and indeed in Wales and Northern Ireland. I do my best. I do my best, but you know, I know sometimes it feels like England gets conflated with the United Kingdom, but it doesn't. We talk about UK issues because they involve everybody, but I do acknowledge that it might sound a little bit rum if you're north of the border that we are turning our attention to this story because of the continuing fallout that Nicola Sturgeon finds herself facing. And I'd like, if I may, to have a completely open and frank conversation about this. There's a little bit of me that I'm a tiny little bit uncomfortable having a conversation that hinges basically on the question of whether or not you believe somebody. And yet it occurs to me that with some political figures from the recent past, I've got no problem whatsoever casting aspersions on people's honesty or integrity. Peter Mandelson, if you're coming from the left, Boris Johnson, if you're coming from the right, although I don't think they've got a great deal in common except a slightly strained relationship with the truth. And yet I don't know whether it is a sort of innate... Is there such a thing as benign sexism, do you think? So if you are minded to treat a woman differently from a man because you were raised to open doors and have a slightly higher standard of behaviour when dealing with women than you do with men. Would that kick in? Would that explain it? I don't want to call a woman a liar, but then again, you know, you look at some of the female politicians who've polluted public discourse in this country in recent years. I've never really struggled to be, God forbid, outspoken about them. But yeah, so I'm guarding against that. I mean, fill your boots. Tell me why you don't believe her. This is a story that, the more you look at it, the more extraordinary it becomes. It is absolutely breathtaking that you can have a leader of a major political party in this country who is married to a man who is stealing from that party hundreds of thousands of pounds and spending them on everything from video games to coffee machines to motorhomes and Volkswagen Golfs. And I wonder whether part of the reason we balk at the story is it's almost unbelievable. And that's why I think the key question is about believability. But what I'm going to do is really hit you over the head with the why of it, not just the what of it. So I want to know what you think, but I really want to know why. So I did a quick straw poll in the office before I came on air, and it immediately broke three ways. One was, I believe her. One was from a Scottish colleague, I don't believe her. And one was, I think it's a sort of form of willful ignorance. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, if you come down to your breakfast in the morning and there's a brand new coffee machine there, aren't you going to want to know where it came? I don't know whether I buy willful ignorance. I don't know how much Mrs. O'Brien spends on certain things unless I specifically ask. And, you know, if it's not a world you know anything... I reckon I could convincingly tell Mrs. O'Brien that I bought the new James Bond game for the PlayStation this weekend. I think it cost me 60 quid. If I told her it cost 20 quid, she'd probably believe me. 25 quid? If it's a world about which you know absolutely nothing, then you could probably tell your partner a porky pie, a little untruth, a white lie, and they would be none the wiser. Did you know that you can spend, wait for it, £3,232 on a coffee machine? And did you know that? Some friends of mine bought a new house and it came with an equipped kitchen, and we were there shortly after they'd moved in, and we started looking up how much all the appliances had cost. They hadn't even done so before they bought the house because they really liked their house. And there was a coffee machine in that house that cost somewhere in the region of £3,000. But I'm not going to lie to you, before that happened, I'm not sure I was even aware that you could spend that sort of money on a coffee machine. What does it do? Bring it to you in bed? I mean, for what is the difference in the quality of a coffee from a machine that... I've got one that cost a few hundred quid. It's a decent machine. It does proper espressos and you know, you can see the pressure gauge on it and it tamps down the coffee and it's got bells and whistles and you have to clean it occasionally and it'll froth up the milk for you if you want. I got it from Lakeland It was about 500 quid, was it? 400 quid? I think I got an ex-display model, so it was probably slightly cheaper than it would have been if it had been brand new. What on earth? This isn't the phone-in. This isn't the phone-in. But what on earth does a coffee machine do that costs 5 times more than the one I've got? What does it even do? I can't even begin to think. It doesn't sprinkle the coffee on the top. Does it do little pictures like they do in Cafe Nero? Does it do a little teddy bear face on the top of the frothed up milk? What does it even do? Yeah, the Bond game's great, by the way. So I fill your boots on that one would be my advice. I'm not far into it, but it's absolutely beautiful. It really is. And I was with a mate yesterday who has somehow managed to find the hours in the day, despite being a parent of slightly younger children than mine, to spend a good few hours on it. And that's slightly unnerving. Graham has just named my coffee machine based on the tiny clues that I gave you. Is that because there's only one brand that Lakeland sell? Probably. Is it? Anyway, the phone-in is not about various coffee machine performances. The phone-in is about whether or not you believe Nicola Sturgeon. It's even as I say those words, I'm why am I uncomfortable asking that question, do you think? Because I don't think I'd be uncomfortable asking you a question like that about Boris Johnson. Do you believe that Boris Johnson honestly couldn't remember who gave him the money to refurbish his flat? Do you remember when he claimed he couldn't remember who'd given him the money? So I think hundreds of thousands of pounds, or certainly tens of thousands of pounds, to buy things that could easily have appeared on Peter Morell's wish list. And Johnson's claim, I think, was that he couldn't remember how he'd got the money. So you walk into your house, you see a £5 million hat stand, and you can't remember who gave you the money to buy the hat stand. Maybe it was just too obvious. Maybe it is because... maybe it's because there is a strong chance she is telling the truth, in which case asking the question of whether or not she's telling the truth could be cruel if she is, whereas with Johnson it was never really on the cards that he was it? I think we can all agree about that. So maybe I feel a little bit uncomfortable this morning because we are potentially maligning an entirely innocent woman. An entirely innocent woman. I felt very sorry for her yesterday. I watched a couple of the clips of her interview on the BBC. I felt sorry for her because the betrayal is on a scale that's almost impossible to get your head around, right? If she was entirely ignorant of what her husband was doing, then he was, trashing, potentially, in the event of discovery, he was trashing her political and personal reputation. Your own husband. They've been married for many years. They don't have children. Her political and personal reputation is kind of who she is. It was so strange when she walked away, and now you realise why. She was obviously across the detail of this story via lawyers and police, one imagines, way before we were, and she realised her own position was going to be rendered unsustainable by the behaviour of her husband, regardless of whether or not she knew. And I don't know that we'll ever know for sure whether she knew or not, but the scale of the embezzlement and the existence of these spoils in her own house, on her mother-in-law's drive, just does create a really suspicious miasma, doesn't it? I'm going to play you a little clip of her. So she wore a necklace that she obviously valued and treasured, and he'd nicked the money from her party, the party she led, in order to buy her the necklace. So I don't know, maybe you're made of sterner stuff than I am. And how easy is it to abandon footballification at this point? Scottish independence, of all the subjects, I find very difficult to discuss because I get called rude names by everybody. It's just not fair, honestly. You think the Middle East is tricky, or conversations about transphobia and the appalling treatment of transgender people in this country. You think those conversations are tricky. Wait until you have a conversation about Scottish independence. I think it was the first time I actually got exposed to truly toxic conduct. And I'm not putting the blame, you'll notice, on either side, but it was the first time I got exposed to truly toxic conduct online. So, if you hate her or love her, and would it be fair to say that your attitude to Nicola Sturgeon is going to be largely defined by your attitude towards independence? Then you're going to decide whether she's telling the truth or lying based entirely on things that have got nothing to do with her or the evidence that's in front of you. Are you an SNP supporter? Yes. Do you believe Nicola Sturgeon? Yes. Are you an SNP supporter? No. Do you believe Nicola Sturgeon? No. How do you leave that at the door? That's why the why is so important. So I say, what do you think about this? Is it I believe her, I don't believe her, or I think she's guilty of willful ignorance, not asking enough questions even though she must have been suspicious? Or wholly innocent? I'm at the moment going with wholly innocent. You know people who are so wrapped up in their work that they'd struggle to tell you what day it is. It's perfectly feasible she's got no idea that £3,000 coffee machines even exist. I often get the day wrong and the time on this programme. Look how wrapped up I am in my work. If Keith came in wearing some new pumps... Actually, that's not a very good example. I'm feigning ignorance there. My trainer game is quite strong. What might you spend a lot of money on that I would not know anything about? Turntables. Yeah? I mean, what, can you spend £2,000 on turntables? You get a perfectly decent one for £300. Am I right or not? But it doesn't matter, because the point is I'm proving to you that I don't know anything. So you come home with some turntables, Keith. Suddenly got an image of just lying in bed together there like Morecambe and Wise writing a play. So Keith comes home with some new turntables. I say, what did you spend? How much did they cost? I've got no idea. Whatever comes out of his mouth is going to be true based on whether I trust him or not, or how suspicious I am to start with. How much did you spend on the turntables? Oh, £600. Oh, that's... Right, you deserve it, darling. You've been working very hard recently. Turns out they cost £6,000. Can you drop £6,000 on turntables? Yes, you can. Easily, he says. Easily. Have you? Drop £6,000? We're paying you too much. £6,000 on turntables? You must be having a giraffe. If you came home with a giraffe, then you'd probably start asking questions, right? Because you'd probably look that up. You'd think, how much does a giraffe cost anyway? But if you came home with a coffee machine or some turntables, or... No way did you know that you could spend £2,618.16 on pepper and salt grinders. You just didn't know that. You might be aware of Lalique, because you've seen it on the Antiques Roadshow. You might not be aware of Lalique, which is the name of the company that made the salt and pepper grinders. But there's no way, if you plump them on the table at Sunday lunch, and said, I got some new salt and pepper grinders, darling. You say, they're lovely. How much did they cost? And he says, they were quite expensive, actually. I nearly did an accent there. That would not help in this conversation, would it, if I started doing my vague attempts at Scottish accents? And he said something, they were quite expensive, actually, darling. They were £100. They were £100 each. And you'd go, God, that's a lot of money to spend on a salt and pepper grinder. Turns out they're over £1,000 each. They're over £1,000 each. And I currently believe her. I think I believe her. Well, I do believe her. Anyway, have a listen to this, because it's possibly the reason why I can feel my sympathy reaching places I'm not sure it should be reaching.
As part of the campaign, we went to visit this amazing business, the Shetland Jewellers, and I was being shown around the shop, and I stopped at this pendant. I mean, you've seen pictures of it, it's beautiful. Later that night, Peter said to me, I've got a surprise for you. And I saw you admiring this pendant and gave me it. Sorry. I loved that necklace and I wore it a lot. And this is the other thing. The idea that I would have gone about wearing things that I had known were anything other than what they were presented to me as, a gift from my husband, and to then find out that these were gifts given to me that he'd bought with the party's money, causes a level of, I don't know, pain, bewilderment. I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm going to try. I'm just not sure I will ever properly come to terms with that.
And that's why I believe her, because to be party to it would be an act of such egregious idiocy, never mind corruption, that, and I know some politicians have got the front to trouser £5 million in secret and pretend that they're somehow the victim. But to be walking around, I mean, that was the point, wasn't it? Farage desperately tried to keep it secret. He's not walking around with a £5 million sign on his back saying, I belong to a Thai businessman. The effrontery of it. There's no way, if she knew, she would have gone along with it, but I can't prove that, I don't know the woman, but there's no way, if she knew, that she would have sort of advertised the fruits of his embezzlement. So I'm going to hit you with the why. Why do you think what you think? And the reason why I believe her is because the scale of the offence, the scale of the complicity, for a politician who, you know, whose reputation relies entirely on transparency and integrity, it's just inconceivable to me that she, and indeed almost anyone, would know about this kind of activity and do nothing. You know, I'm not walking around wearing the bloody thing. I'm not going to walk around wearing the necklace. But that's not necessarily a generosity of spirit that I'd extend to any other politician. So I can't quite pin down the precise why I believe her. So do you? Do you think Nicola Sturgeon is telling the truth? And if you do, or indeed if you don't, or if you're going with the willful ignorance, then I want you to tell me why on 0345 6060973. The other bit I want to do is to look at how easy it is to be entirely ignorant of what your partner is doing. But I will move on to that. In the first instance, I completely want you to tell me whether or not you think it's possible to live with someone, whether or not you believe that Nicola Sturgeon lived with someone who was stealing £400,000 from their joint employer, spending it on stuff that they were sharing and had absolutely no idea at all what was going on. Because I do. And I think I know why.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Fishing tackle is a big one. Quite a few men are possessed of fishing tackle that their partners haven't got. The fishing tackle and bicycles, I would suggest to you, are things that men in particular have. With women, I don't want to be casually sexist, but it's more likely to be stuff that you keep in the wardrobe, right? Like shoes or a frock or something. But and your husband or your boyfriend's got absolutely no idea how much money you actually spent on it. You'd need to have separate bank accounts for this to work, but they do. Sturgeon and Murrell did have separate bank accounts, apparently. So fishing tackle and bicycles. A mate of mine spends money on bicycles that is absolutely, breathtaking. He can afford it, but I don't think his wife would approve if she knew. He's knocked us zero off the price of a bicycle in the past. So that's another reason why I kind of believe that it's possible not to know that your husband is spending serious money on stuff that he can't afford. Because the minute you think he can't afford it, you say, where's the money coming from? And you begin to suspect that he is up to no good. So do you believe Nicola Sturgeon? And if so, why? And if not, why not? Neil's in West Lothian. Neil, the West Lothian question. Do you believe Nicola Sturgeon?
I'll try and answer it for you, James.
Go on.
Probably not. I worked for the Scottish Government before I retired, and I met Nicola Sturgeon. I came across Nicola Sturgeon a few times.
Okay.
She was a very confident individual. She was very much in charge of her brief. I mean, she was the ultimate alpha. And
Yes.
I would just find it a little bit of a stretch to the space where she's not in complete control and had a complete grasp of everything going on around
Really?
her. So probably not. I probably wouldn't believe it. But I would leave a little bit of room to be persuaded because I'm not 100%. It's just my take on it.
I think in some ways I'd use your argument almost the other way round and say that because she's so entirely focused on her job, she lives for her political career, she's not going to be bothered about asking for receipts when her husband comes home with some new pens.
Yeah, okay, so that's maybe the little gap. But look at the story that's running today, James, about 108 toilet rolls, right? If you
You're gonna mea culpa. You're gonna have to fill me in on that one.
Okay, so in the list of things that Peter bought.
Yes.
A couple of days before she was telling everybody not to go out and panic buy, he bought 108 toilet rolls, right? And I don't know, James.
Is this breaking news? Is this an exclusive?
Yeah. It's on the LBC website. If you couldn't get your toilet door open because there was 108 toilet rolls in the toilet, would you not be saying, Peter, what have you been buying?
It wouldn't cross my mind. If Mrs. O'Brien came home with 108 toilet rolls, it would not cross my mind that she'd been robbing.
Maybe you weren't well. Maybe you needed it.
You're not going to think, he's up to no good. Why, he's bought 108 toilet rolls, he must be a wrong un.
No, but you would say, Peter, I'm just about to go on national television to make an announcement telling everybody not to panic buy toilet rolls. What have you done?
Well, that's a question about the marriage more than the embezzlement, isn't it? That's how can you go out and do the polar opposite of what I've told everybody else to do?
But isn't this the thing? Is you cannot just look at this in terms of the marriage alone.
No, your phone line's going a bit. Your phone line's gone a bit glitchy. So
the most successful.
No, I said your phone line's gone a bit glitchy, and then it finally failed. So the toilet roll angle. 108. I don't think that changes my positioning on it or my thinking on it. But the question of not knowing is one that quite a lot of people have got some sympathy for, not least because, and Amanda didn't know her husband had gone bankrupt until her own car got repossessed. It's not quite the same. It's just the list of things that were brought into the house, at which point never did she say, where is the money coming from for this stuff, would demand that you knew how much it cost. And one of the first things that struck me was that it's almost all stuff that you wouldn't actually guess the price of. A wine coaster for £3,500. You just wouldn't think that had cost £3,500. You might think, again, you could probably knock a nought off it, unless you're in that world. And when they bought the necklace up in the Shetland Islands, even if it was expensive, and I don't off the top of my head know how much that cost, she would think he'd bought it with his own money. Yeah, they didn't have children. They've been in jobs for a long time. They've probably paid off their mortgages, and he wanted to buy his wife a present, so he bought her a necklace, and she loved it so much she wore it all the time. The idea that she would do that while simultaneously knowing that it was, to all intents and purposes, nicked, I don't know. I can't quite see it. Andrew's in Cumbernauld. Andrew, what would you like to say?
To say that I can believe that believe her up to a point. Because if she's sitting down to breakfast and there's a new coffee machine there, yes, and she gets told, she might not assume that you could spend 4 figures on a coffee machine.
No.
And if you ask and you get told, I got it from Argos, the minute she gets told, I got it from Argos, the idea that stupid money had been spent on it and it was possibly therefore dodgy goes out the window.
Yes, I agree. There's a but coming, isn't there, Andrew?
Yeah, but yeah, things like salt and pepper sets, that looked like silly money, but it was silly money, but it did. When you look at the actual items, they don't look silly money.
No, exactly my point. But that's not the but.
The but is that you can buy a lot of this stuff and not particularly raise eyebrows. Mm. But when a motorhome shows up in your mother-in-law's driveway, no matter how decent a pay packet the two of you are on, that should raise.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point where you can't believe that her mother-in-law has never mentioned it to her, because that's the point at which you can't say, "Oh, I got it from Argos." It was parked on his mum's drive, and she says, I had no idea. But there's surely at some point his mum is going to say over Sunday lunch, or going to say at Christmas, when are you going to take that bloody great motorhome off my front drive, Peter?
Yeah.
That is quite.
Presume. I don't know what her mother-in-law's income is, but whether or not it's motorhome money, you're going to ask anyway.
But even then, even then, it would involve asking, "Is that yours?" And her mother-in-law would say, "No, it's yours. It's Peter's."
Yeah. At which point she turns to him and says, "Why am I only finding out about this now?"
Yes. Could he say it only? Could you? I mean, are you big on motorhomes, Andrew? Do you know a lot about motorhomes?
I haven't got a Scooby with motorhomes.
No, I haven't got a Scooby with motorhomes either. Well, funnily enough, of course, Scooby did indeed travel around in a sort of motorhome, didn't he? In the Mystery Machine with Fred and Wilma and Daphne and the rest of them and Shaggy. But we digress. Could you? If I parked a motorhome on your drive, and you said, how much did that cost? And it was, I knew, a £124,550 Niesman and Bischoff vehicle. I could tell you it cost 25 grand, right? And you'd be none the wiser.
I would probably raise an eyebrow and go and check.
30.
Yeah, but the thing is, I would, for a coffee machine and salt and pepper sets, I think, yeah, well, whatever. That's affordable to somebody on his sort of income.
I've got it on HP. I'm paying a few quid. Has she ever been... No, that's the thing. She's not claiming that, is she? She's claiming she knew absolutely nothing about it, even when it was parked on her mother-in-law's drive for 2 years. And at no point was a conversation held by anybody in the entire family about why Peter had parked a motor. So it's not like she said, I thought it cost 30 grand. At no point did anybody ask... Did anybody even mention that your husband's parked a motorhome in my house, or in the bit of land between my house and next door, or whatever the exact details were?
The thing is, I don't think she even asked. It's not as if she said, "How did you manage that, dear?" And he tells her, albeit a lie, and then she says, "Yeah, all right, whatever." But she didn't even ask.
So you find her defence credible up until the moment the motorhome gets parked in front of the house?
Yes, up to a point, yeah, I can kind of believe it.
And that makes you think she's lying now?
I think she was perhaps... It was insufficiently curious, I think is the expression.
That's a lovely phrase. Insufficiently curious, which is a cousin of willfully ignorant.
Yeah, so most of it you can say, yeah, all right, I can kind of go with that. But for some of it, no. I think
the motorhome is going to be very hard to get past, which is ironic because they usually are. It's 10:30. Thank you, Andrew. Phone lines are open on this. 0345 6060973. Do you know, I'm such an amateur. I forgot my rule on this. I was going to ask all my Scottish callers where they stood on independence in general before I examined their scepticism or otherwise regarding Nicola Sturgeon's story. But hey, better late than never. I'll do that moving forward. It's Thelma, not Wilma, in Scooby-Doo. My apologies. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Thelma. It's not even Thelma. It's definitely not Wilma. If you're just tuning in, all the big stories live on LBC. But the slightly nerdy lady in Scooby-Doo is Velma with a V, not Thelma with a T, or indeed Wilma with a W. Why are we talking about that? Well, it's a kind of motorhome, isn't it, the Mystery Machine? And Scottish people like to say, I haven't got a Scooby, when they say it's rhyming slang for clue, I haven't got a Scooby-Doo. It's something I've borrowed, actually, despite not being Scottish. And is it feasible that Nicola Sturgeon didn't have a Scooby about the money with which a motorhome was purchased by her husband and then parked in at the very near vicinity of her mother-in-law's house? And Andrew sort of shook my generosity of spirit there. And that may be the big test, but just imagine. So part of the defence she offered up on the BBC yesterday was very much, I found plausible, the idea they both earn fairly high salaries. Some of the mad stuff she just never saw. First she heard about the 10 grand watches and the likes of it were when he pleaded guilty in court. Perfectly easy to believe that a coffee machine that cost £3,500 cost a fraction of that. £500 or £600 is a lot of money to spend on a coffee machine, but not an impossible amount, not an inconceivable amount. So ditto the necklace. They were not poor. They didn't have a lot of outgoing. She was obsessed with her career. He ran the household. She would give him money for her share of the household bills and took no interest whatsoever in matters fiscal, matters financial. But her own words were that she couldn't have she had no conscious memory. What if she doesn't get on with her mother-in-law? She doesn't go around to she goes around as rarely as she can. I don't know the details of that relationship. But I just find it implausible that she would know and do nothing. That's all, because reputation is everything. I don't know why I keep thinking of The Crucible, the Arthur Miller play. And all the main protagonist has at the end of it is his good name. It's an allegory for the McCarthyite witch hunts regarding communists, but Arthur Miller, a particular stroke of genius, turned it into a play about the Salem witch hunts in the 17th century. Everyone's accusing everyone of everything, and one of the main protagonists, it talks in a wonderful speech near the end of the play about all he has is his good name. It's all, and you take that away from me, and you take everything. I think Shakespeare has had. Is it in Merchant of Venice? There's a similar theme. He who takes that takes all, and I just think that her. I mean, everything that we know about her would just balk. It would be repulsed by the knowledge, and that means that there wasn't any knowledge. 0345 6060973. I don't know whether anybody used the motorhome or not. I am aware, as a couple of you have told me, of one story at some point claiming it was used for electioneering, but she now says that the vehicle, on the occasions that she visited her mother-in-law's house, she doesn't remember consciously seeing it. So here's another little clip, which may or may not swing your pendulum.
Where the motorhome was round the side of the house, which is not immediately visible in the way that we went into the house. And it's between their house and the next door neighbour's house. Now, I genuinely don't have any conscious memory of seeing that motorhome. If I saw it, I probably would have assumed it was a neighbour's. My mother and father-in-law were in their mid-80s. It would not have crossed my mind it was theirs, and why would it have crossed my mind that it was the SNP's, that Peter had bought it?
Well, if you go to somebody's house, a family member, and there's a new vehicle parked in the drive. It's somewhere
But
you
it
go
wasn't-
regularly.
the thing is,
It would
it
be a normal
wasn't-
thing to say, even to say, has your neighbour got a new
it
motorhome?
wasn't
And it
parked
was
in-
never discussed?
Never.
Ever?
Never.
At all?
I genuinely do not recall seeing it in a way that I registered it and thought, there's a motorhome.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not quite as clear as I was at the outset, but I believe that, I think. Do you? 0345 606 0973. And maybe draw on some personal experience now as well. So, you know that it is possible. You just didn't ask any questions about it. You just didn't even know it was there. It seems unlikely to me that the mother-in-law would never have said when they went round for their tea, "You're going to get rid of that motorhome soon." But I just can't quite believe she's got the brass neck that you would need in order to conduct the conversation in the way that she just did. And remember, she's stepped back from politics as well, so she could have just hidden for the rest of her life. She didn't have to come forward and give an interview. That is her good name. For the record, other politicians I'm not particularly admiring of, who I don't think would lie about something like this, I'd put Kemi Badenoch on that list. I think if she had the vaguest suspicions that her husband was nicking money from the Conservative Party, then she would go absolutely nuclear on him, and quite possibly publicly as well. I don't know these people. I just think you need a very particular and peculiar type of personality to pull off something like this, and she doesn't strike me as the kind of person that has it. Paige puts it better than I just did by saying she is an incredible actress if she is lying. Suzanne is in Sittingbourne. Suzanne, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I too was married to somebody who embezzled money.
Oh.
I know. I had no clue. I mean, it wasn't in the hundreds of thousands that Nicola Sturgeon's husband did, but
Okay.
it's a really weird place to be because I came home, we both worked for the same organisation, but he worked for a subsidiary.
Right.
And I had I had a job where I signed off big money all the time.
Yeah.
And I came home one day and his car was not on the drive, but he was there. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing from home from work early?" And he said, I've got to tell you something. And I said, okay. We had a young family. This is 25 years ago. We divorced, so it's a long time ago. But
Right.
he said, I've been suspended. And I said, right, okay, what for? And he said, I've been spending money that I shouldn't have. And what it turned out was that he had like a company credit card and he'd go out and spend it for company stuff. But you were also allowed at that time to spend it on stuff for yourself. And you were supposed to settle it up at the end of each month, but he hadn't. And this had rolled on month after month and he'd been ducking and diving, dodging and weaving. And
What sort of stuff had he been buying? What sort of stuff had he been buying?
God, no. The only thing he could tell me that he had purchased, and this is laughable, was a pair of trainers. Honestly, you are filled with such incredulity that you cannot get your head round how somebody has put our lives, the family life, at risk, their job at risk, for nothing to show for it. You know, we didn't have a motorhome on the drive, but this was a few thousand.
Right.
And I honestly boggled my mind how I could live with somebody.
Yeah.
He was larger than life. Everybody loved him. He was great fun to be around. He was an out-and-out liar. And he'd had patterns of lying through our marriage.
Right.
And we'd got over it, we'd sorted it out, when we moved on, and then the next year there would be something else, and the next year there would be something else. And because we had a young family, I just, you kind of just try to get through it. But honestly, I think probably Peter Morell was a very good liar, and also probably she was maybe not aware that he was, but she knew his personality. And that's the only thing that I can think is she may not have known, and she didn't show enough professional or personal curiosity. However, he could have been one of these characters that he just washes over stuff.
Just incredibly plausible.
Yeah.
Everything you say, where did that come? Oh, that's fine, don't worry about that. It only cost £100 or got it on special.
That's it. She's a VBP, isn't she? She's a very busy person.
Yes.
She's working incredibly long hours, 7 days a week. She's not paying enough attention to our home life, let alone,
And that is very much her
from.
defence, and that's entirely feasible.
Yeah, but the only thing I think is the motorhome issue. I'm like, seriously? It's massive. It's not like a little camper van. It's huge. And I think, I think she must have asked a question about that.
Actually, it isn't that big. It is more camper van size, like a big ambulance size than an articulated lorry. You just heard her explanation about, where it was parked and how they approached the house. Is it naive of me to say, if she was she'd be mad to try and BS her way out of that? I mean, it's so implausible.
She would be.
That it must be true.
Exactly. But also, maybe she did ask, or maybe she went, what's that round there? And someone went, oh, blah, blah, blah. And she went, oh, right, yeah, okay, not my bag, I'm moving on. Because, maybe she, as I say, she wasn't professionally or personally curious enough. I used to beat myself up about things that used to happen at my house, and I used to think, would I...
You mean looking back, you'd say, why wasn't I more suspicious when he turned up with a new, whatever it was, a new pair of trainers?
But also, I didn't notice anything.
No.
And that's the thing, because they do BS their way out of stuff.
Do you think other people disbelieved you? Do you think when it all came out, other people might have thought, I bet she knew. I bet Suzanne knew.
I tell you who thought that the sun shone out of his backside was his mum and dad.
His mum, I knew you were going to say
they didn't believe me. He was arrested, he was put in jail,
Crikey.
He was given a caution, they let him off, but he lost his job. But they never really acknowledged that he was that sort of person. Which
I suppose
really sad.
You can't go there, can you? I mean, I don't know how you ever get back onto... Just because I'm a bit weird in terms of my own curiosity. The car wasn't there when you got home because it was a company car and he'd been suspended, so he'd had to leave it at work.
Yeah.
And was that the end of the marriage? I mean, or did you try and battle? If you don't mind me asking.
Well, no, that's fine, because I came under suspicion at work as well because it was the same organisation, but... Right. He worked slightly in a different subsidiary.
Oh, so he could have blown up your life. Well, he kind of did blow up your life.
Seriously, yeah, because I was audited because of it.
Gosh.
So the marriage lasted probably another year because I had children.
Yeah.
And I couldn't work out how I could extract myself from this marriage. And because bunny rabbits and rainbows, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you want everything to last forever, and you think, we can try, but honestly, he just kept doing the same thing.
It comes down to a trust issue, whereas this seems to have been an absolute ambush of Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, goodness knows what happened to the man. A few people commenting on possibilities of illness and things like that, which is feasible, but nothing to do with what Nicola Sturgeon is currently going through. I'm sorry that you went through similar. I think you were more right than I was about the size of the thing. I'm looking at a photograph and... obviously, vehicular knowledge is not my strong point, but Neil suggests it is a big old thing, as you said. You'd need a C1 licence to drive it. It's more like a small coach than a kind of a minivan, as it were. 10:46 is the time. Suzanne has been there and can buy the idea that Nicola Sturgeon knew nothing about this easily until the motorhome gets parked on the mother-in-law's drive, which is why I played you the clip. Because if that's acting, then, I was about to say she should be in the new series of Take the High Road. But or Taggart, I'm just trying to think of, or Baby Reindeer, in a Scottish-based TV drama, because that is extraordinarily good acting. If she is not telling the truth, but, Boris Johnson could stand up in the House of Commons and claim that there were no parties, and then claim a month later that, well, actually there were parties, but I didn't know anything about them, and then claim a few weeks after that, well, actually there were parties and I did know about them, but I definitely didn't go to any of them, and then stand up a few weeks after that and say, well, actually, there were parties and I did know about them, and I was in there filling my face and guzzling champagne at them as well. Oh, and I gave a speech at another one as well. There were parties and I did attend them, but I definitely didn't give a speech. And then a few weeks later, okay, there were parties. So you see what I mean? Some people are just really good at lying. I've never thought that Nicola Sturgeon was, but who knows?
James O'Brien on LBC.
10 minutes to 11. Apologies are fascinating things. I mean, I've got this thing, and I should have worked this out a while ago. Nicola Sturgeon, obviously perceived as a left-wing politician, as being of the left. And that, I think, is why when transgressions occur or when suspicions arise, that there is a glee in right-wing media to go after left-wing. And you may not agree with this, but it's almost as if a certain type of right-wing ideology accommodates some form of corruption. Of course they're dishonest. Of course they're in it for themselves. Of course they've taken £5 billion and tried to keep it secret. At least these people don't pretend to be whiter than white. You know where you are with Boris Johnson. Just ask one of his many ex-wives or mistresses. They'll tell you exactly how trustworthy he is. So there's an ease. It's not just political bias. There's a sort of moral laxity involved when it comes to right-wing politicians and their moral transgressions or their depravity and corruption. If you look at Donald Trump, for example, he told you who he is. You know, he boasts about sexually assaulting women. But these lefties, pretending to be all holier than thou and whiter than white, when they put a foot wrong, we're going to come after them with all guns blazing, even if the foot that they've put wrong is as nothing compared to what our political heroes have done. I think that's just a fact of life. But of course it doesn't mean, as Peter Mandelson has proved and will continue to prove later today when more details come out about his appointment and some of the conversations he was involved in, the right wing do not have a monopoly on these kind of behaviours. What interests me is Sturgeon's refusal to apologise. And I mean, if she is telling the truth, then of course she should not apologise. Some people suggesting that she should apologise for the damage that's been done to the SNP. But if Keith set fire to the office, why would I apologise? I knew nothing about it, you know? That's the whole point, isn't it? You can't compromise your own integrity and compound your husband's offence by apologising for it. I'm sorry for the actions that I knew nothing about. But then you sort of think of historical apologies. But that's at a national level. A country can apologise via a prime minister for things that a country did in the past. If it's treated another country appallingly, then you could apologise now as prime minister or even as a monarch. You could apologise for the actions of your predecessors, even if they had nothing to do with you, because that relationship is on a country. It's an intra-country relationship. Whereas for Nicola Sturgeon to apologise for what her husband has done while insisting that she knew nothing about it, I think would be ridiculous. Right, but of course it won't stop people demanding it. Donna is in Glasgow. Donna, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
I believe her. And the reason I believe her is because, similarly to your last caller, I was in a similar position. My ex-husband of, 20 years ago now had a drug habit from me so successfully.
Oh, wow.
And anybody that knows me still goes, "You didn't know?" And I'm like, well, no, because I've never took drugs in my life. I don't know anything about that culture. And he told me he was on vodka and Red Bull, and well, he wasn't. So, and I think as women, though, and I think the wider point about Nicola Sturgeon is the fact that even though she was running a literal country, probably 24/7 some days, and never switching off, she's still expected as a woman to run her own home and be in charge of her own home.
Yeah.
So as a woman, you're literally expected, no matter what else you're doing, no matter what job you're doing, no matter how hard you're working, no matter all the nonsense that you need to balance, you still need to balance the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the buying the toilet paper.
Do we think that if the roles had been reversed and the party leader was a man and the embezzler was the wife, the coverage would have been notably different then?
Absolutely, 100%.
Oh, how can you can't expect him to know what's going on with the family accounts? He's busy running a country.
Yes, he's running a country. I mean, look at poor Boris. How was he supposed to remember who gave him hundreds of thousands of pounds to decorate his house? He was running a country. Yeah,
but you and I wouldn't have been part. Would we have treated the story any differently? Not. I don't mean right-wing client journalists who give Boris Johnson a free pass on absolutely everything. I don't know that I would treat this story different. I don't think I'm treating it differently because she's a woman.
Exactly, and you're not, because you're not one of them, as bad as that sounds. But simply put, she's a woman. If she wasn't a woman, we wouldn't be expecting her to notice and do everything. But because she's her, and because it's Nicola Sturgeon, we expect her to know every single thing. As for the, the big motor that essentially was outside the mother-in-law's house, my ex-husband, I never went to his parents' house. Couldn't tell you what was there. They came to us. So he could have literally stashed 18 giraffes in their spare room or in their driveway.
And you wouldn't have known. Well, she's not claiming that she never went to the house. She's just claiming that she never consciously saw the motorhome. And she's asking you to believe that her mother-in-law never mentioned it. She never said, Peter, when are you going to get rid of that motorhome you've got parked around the back or parked around the side of the house? And that would depend on the nature of that relationship and how often they were there. But I mean, that's the bit where I think I would struggle. I don't know.
Are we scrutinising his mother?
Yeah, a bit. I'm still believing her, but I don't know how much money I'd put on it anymore because of the motorhome.
But again, what about Peter Murrell's mother? I was scrutinising her and saying, what did she know? Because she might have known everything and known a guy clearly had an addiction, a spending addiction, because he was buying some crazy stuff.
All sorts of stuff.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, his bum must have been the cleanest bum in the whole of the UK. But, and he does cracking salt and pepper. But think about it this way. Your kid rocks up with a motorhome and you're like, oh, where'd you get this?
Yeah.
And you don't, it's not her driveway. So his mother, we don't know what she said, but I would love to know.
It seems unlikely that she knew that it was his and chose not to ask any questions at all about where the money had come from. So it's actually easier to believe that she didn't know that it was his, and that, I mean, harder perhaps to buy the idea that she didn't consciously see it. But this is a bit unfair given that I forgot to do it to all my other Scottish callers. But were you're a fan of Nicola Sturgeon previous to this story? Yeah,
I really liked her. Honestly, the way during COVID, she was magic, and I'm a staunch independent supporter. I used to think when a few years ago I wasn't that much a fan. I'm still not great with the way they are in healthcare, still not great with education. But at the same time, I actually, about 5-6 years ago, before COVID, I thought Anna Sarwar would have been a cracking First Minister in an independent Scotland. But his behaviour lately, honestly, it's...
Well, there's be careful what you wish for. I've only recently worked out why it was a curse when the Chinese used to say to each other, may you live in interesting times. We certainly live in interesting times, Donna, but I'm not sure that I want to. I just very fondly, that's one of the reasons I think many people feel let down by Keir Starmer, as we thought things were going to be a little bit duller under him, and in some ways they are, but in other ways, of course, they're not. Thank you, Donna. Last call on this to Fiona, who's in Truro. Fiona, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Some of what I'll keep it short and sweet because the last two ladies had a lot of overlap and they had personal experience of living with someone who's a, ingrained deceiver.
Yes.
But I just want to say, I wonder if there's a little misogynism, and again, this has just been said 2 calls ago, but people live with serial killers and don't know. Why are we focused so much on?
It's very true. I mean, that was almost a nervous chuckle, actually, because you're obviously right. People live with serial killers and have no idea.
They do, and you think, who can you deceive most? It's someone you know best. You've got most opportunity to do it. And as you said, nobody's asking questions about Nicola Sturgeon's in-laws and what they knew and what they didn't. And we're often blind with people we love, with family, with children, with spouses. But I think more of the questions that should have been asked and never going to be asked by the gutter press, and I don't mean to do that, is what about the institutional stupidity of having couples in position, in a good organisation, in most civil servant organisations, you rigorously don't have couples working together where there could be any overlap of
yes, I agree with that. I agree
and
with
finance.
that.
And
yes.
That's got to be done. And I think I get the impression that all political parties are a bit like the Wild West. They need more legislation about accepting huge donations and basically buying favours from politicians. And they need it internally. And everyone of a certain level, and especially in the financial side of it, should expect to be audited, up to their eyeballs on a regular basis.
Yeah,
so,
it should be just I don't know what rules you'd have without being discriminatory, but the idea that a husband and wife can hold the two key positions in any power structure that is fundamentally or supposed to be democratic and transparent seems suboptimal, doesn't it?
It should, and maybe it should be for partners, and maybe it should be for siblings as well. But and I know it sounds astringent, but how many times does it have to go wrong? And
just two signatures. No, I mean it. Steve was a firefighter. Anything that the FBU bought, any union operator buying anything on the FBU's ticket would have to get 2 signatures on it.
Yeah. No, I think things like that,
I'd love to see that. I'd love to have been in that meeting. Sorry, you spent how much on a salt and pepper grinder? That's £2,000, boss. £2,000 on a salt and pepper. Yeah, I mean, there are other questions that need to be answered, but not by them now because they're out of the room. It's it's the party structure issues, and the idea that the former First Minister would march around insisting on her innocence when it wasn't true. I mean, it cuts both ways. Of course she's going to deny that she knew. But the more you look at it and the more you listen, the more objective your own position becomes. And you sort of think, yeah, actually, I believe her. Whereas I wouldn't believe them, or I would believe her and I wouldn't believe him. I think, looking at my inbox, and I should have checked more on previous loyalties and positions, but I think she's getting but it's not 52-48. I'd say she was getting about 60% of the benefit of the doubt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Minutes after 11 is the time. I'm tempted to do Trump again today, or at least the Iran war. I wish I'd never made that Craig David joke now, because it's haunting me. The ceasefire was about to be announced on Friday, and they're bombing again on Monday, as I sort of told you they would. One day it will be true, but that day still seems a very long way off. John Ossoff, a Democrat politician, has said something very clever that I'm afraid had eluded me. I'll play you the little clip of his speech this hour, but the reason why he wants to stick his name on everything, including now a $250 bill, is because he knows somewhere inside that no one will honour him when he's gone. So he's just trying to get... Because you're not supposed to honour yourself, are you? You're supposed to wait to be honoured by others. So even if it is someone as ludicrous as the head of FIFA giving him a peace prize, it is at least coming from someone else. Even if, you surround yourself with sycophants and cronies, you can kid yourself that their praise is authentic. But when it comes to public honours, it's why it's why that Shelley poem, Ozymandias, is so powerful, isn't it? But it's why we've always mocked leaders who honour themselves, who build statues to themselves. Saddam Hussein building statues to himself. If you're going to put up if anyone is ever going to put up a statue of me, it won't be me. Thank you, Keith. That's a lovely thing to say. It won't be me. If you're putting up a statue of yourself, it is a gesture of such epic patheticness that it should probably be demolished the minute it is unveiled. But a statue of yourself, putting your own name on things, right? So Kennedy didn't put his name on the Kennedy Center, did he? But Trump tried to put his name on the Kennedy Center. It's such a great point by John Ossoff. He's building a monument to himself, but he's doing these things now because no one will honour him when he's gone, because he's a failed president and a national disgrace. I'll play you that clip shortly, but I want to start a rather different conversation now. I don't know how long you've been listening to this programme. I don't know how carefully or closely you've listened to it for however long it is that you have listened to it. But there are some subjects that I do a lot less. It is, Davey says, it's like making up your own nickname. It is, isn't it? It is. It's there's always someone at college who sort of, hey, call me, Gripper, or no one calls you that. It's you make up your own nickname. It's like putting up a statue to yourself. I like that. I'm fascinated by why things move in and out of our interest zone. Well, I say it's mostly up to me, isn't it, what we talk about every day? And when I was a younger man, and in fact, I became a father for the first time while doing this job. I became a father while you don't need to say for the first time in that sentence, do you? I became a father while doing this job. The news was shared with my holiday cover by the minicab driver, because that's how old I am, by the minicab driver who dropped me off at the hospital in Hammersmith, or picked me up at the hospital. I can't remember which way round it was. Didn't let on that he knew who I was, because in those days nobody did. But this, unless in fact you were a London-based minicab driver, in which case there was a fairly good chance you had LBC on quite a lot. Clocked who I was without telling me, dropped me off at the hospital or at home, I forget which, and then phoned into LBC to tell the lovely lady who was doing my cover while I was off on paternity leave that we had taken safe delivery of a beautiful baby girl Hey, and I was doing this job. And she's now just coming to the end of her second year at university. That's how much time you and I have spent together. And I used to do loads on maternity wards. I used to do loads on those sort of issues because they were so live in my life. And they don't stop being interesting because they stop being relevant. I move away from them because they're not part of my daily contemplations anymore. But it's ages since I've done anything on maternity wards. And I've noticed something as I prepare to talk to you about a few stories that are around and more that are incoming regarding the state of maternity care in this country. I've noticed a couple of things have changed because I'm no longer very close to the story. We had, and I probably wasn't entirely honest with you about this at the time because it felt ungrateful to take a healthy baby home from the hospital. It felt ungrateful to complain about what happened in the hospital. Do you see what I mean? So my wife was very unhappy with the maternity care we received during the first baby's birth, particularly with one midwife who she felt was incredibly rude. And I obviously had to walk that tightrope familiar to all partners of trying to sort of keep the peace, but while siding with your partner, but also recognising that this, isn't easy. This is a really tricky situation, and they're the professionals, and therefore they probably know what they're doing. Maybe she's not actually being rude. Maybe that is the attitude she needs to adopt in order to get you to do the things that she thinks that you need to do. But I'm not going to say that because, obviously. And I don't know, is that white coat syndrome? I can never fully remember what white coat syndrome is. You just trust the professionals because they're the professionals. Some of us do that in all areas of life, don't we? Some of us do that in all areas of life. You take the car to a mechanic's and you just believe whatever it is that they tell you. Or you get someone round to give you an estimate for building an extension and you just believe what they tell you. It's a foolish way to live. You should at least get second and third opinions, but you can't do that in the labour ward. You know, if your waters have broken and you're in the midst of giving birth, you can't sort of say, excuse me, is there any other midwives available? Because this one's really getting on my nerves. It's just not something you can do. So I think that I think that the conversations that we've had historically have been slightly... I've been a bit of a gatekeeper. And what's interesting about 2 or 3 stories around at the moment is that, and particularly a panorama programme that I think goes out tonight, a lot of the people contributing to the criticism are the healthcare professionals themselves. So a lot of the whistleblowers, a lot of midwives reporting other colleagues, and some of the stories that are emerging here, particularly in Nottingham, are absolutely hideous. There is an acronym that was written on a whiteboard next to the names of heavily pregnant women, and the acronym was FOH. I can tell you what the O stands for, and I can tell you what the H stands for, but I can't tell you what the F stands for. I don't need to, because if I say F off home, you can work out for yourself what the F meant. That was described in a resignation letter from the Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust as long ago as 2018, which BBC Panorama have now seen. In the same letter, another midwife was reported to have advised colleagues to get pregnant women who had arrived worried they were going into labour to go home with the advice, don't be too kind, she'll keep coming back. This is going to be quite triggering, I realise, immediately I start talking about it, isn't it? If you've been through this, it's ever so slightly triggering for me, because that actually happened to us. We were fairly certain it was time to go into the hospital, and they told us it wasn't, to go back. And I did something I'm not actually very good at, despite doing this for a living. I kind of stood my ground and insisted, and then it turned out that the dilation was such that we should have been taken into the hospital and not sent home. If we'd gone home, things could have been quite messy. One midwife that the BBC spoke to recalled a woman calling the hospital to say she was in labour and being told that there was no need for her to be admitted at that time. She was already in labour. A determination to keep women at home for as long as possible before giving birth is a constant theme in many of the stories reported by Panorama. And don't forget, of course, that these stories will involve poor outcomes. In some cases, the worst imaginable. They've spoken to one couple whose baby was stillborn. And then you've got the broader issue, the bigger story is increasing numbers of women. This is today's story. Sky News have been doing a lot on this. More women are dying during pregnancy or in the weeks after giving birth, despite the fact that fewer women are actually giving birth. So, I mean, that is a terrible combination of statistics. And the chief midwife has admitted, and I quote now, "None of us think care is in the right place. We don't think that things are good enough." And it is gratitude, I realise. It absolutely is. The reason why I've not felt comfortable in the past with these kind of stories is because of the epic gratitude you feel to the people who helped you take a healthy baby home from the hospital too, in our case. I don't really want to open up the door to criticism, and that's a mistake. That's foolish of me. That's wrong of me. Other reason why we can do it today is because it is midwives joining in with these criticisms. It is midwives who are adding to these voices. So I think it's a subject just for stories, this, isn't it? And I want it from both sides of the bed. I don't want anybody to think for a minute that I am here to malign every midwife or to demonise every maternity ward, because the one thing you can do if you work in the profession is tell us what's gone wrong. There's a sort of widespread, well, if the chief midwife is saying that none of us think care is in the right place, I would like you, if you're in the business, to tell us why. What do you think has happened? Why is care not in the right place? But I don't have it anymore, but I carried long after our own suboptimal experiences. I had an entirely rose-tinted view of maternity wards, and we were left on our own for an incredible amount of time, to the point where my wife was getting really quite distressed. And I'd go out looking for someone. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, they must have a hierarchy of need in their own minds. They're the professionals, and they've obviously gone somewhere where they feel that they are more needed than they do with us, even if my wife is getting distressed now by the absence of seeing anybody. They're obviously going to be dedicating their resources to the people who they think need them more. So, and I don't think I was being that person, that frightened of confrontation, or that person who doesn't like making a fuss, person who's, just been moaning about their dinner when the waitress comes over and says, "Is everything all right?" And you go, "Oh, yes, it's lovely, thank you so much." "Oh, soup's cold." And it's not gazpacho, Keith. I'm 99% sure I wasn't that person, but there's always a possibility. You're just working as a pregnant woman, or as a partner of a pregnant woman. You're working on the presumption that A, they mean really, really well, and B, they're doing their absolute best. And yet there are so many stories out there now which make it clear that is not true of all of them. That is not true of all of them. So I want the what of it. I want you to tell me what happened to you. Your unhappy outcomes, your unhappy interactions with maternity wards, just to get a picture of how bad things can be. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. That's the question. What actually happened? It's 20 years for me. So there were a couple of moments in the first labour that I'd need to check, actually, before I shared them with you, to be 100% sure that I've remembered them correctly. But you share yours because they're yours. And then the second question is, if you've been doing this job for a while, why do you think things have not got better and have quite possibly, by contrast, got worse? All right? And thank you to all the brilliant midwives and maternity care staff and doctors and nurses for doing what you do. But we're talking today about the other ones. 0345 6060 973. We're trying to work out how many of them there are, what actually explains what's going on, and in the first instance, what happened to you.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Listen, do you want to know something funny? I was about to give Robert a right old kicking because on my screen, right, I get half the message, and if I don't click on it, I don't see the other half of the message. So I thought, God, show me what male privilege looks like. And here's up Robert popping. James, last week I had my blood pressure taken at my GP surgery. It was slightly elevated. When I got home, it was normal. And so I'm getting ready to go, Robert, mate, for heaven's sake, this isn't about you. This is about the women. What kind of a man would listen to a phone-in about maternity care and start sharing stories about his blood? Oh, sorry, Robert. My sister, who's a nurse, told me it was probably white coat syndrome, meaning that due to the presence of a medical professional and increased anxiety, my blood pressure was slightly raised. And I literally asked for clarification on exactly what white coat syndrome was. So the moral of the story, and I accept that it only really applies to me, the moral of the story is always read the whole message before deciding to put someone in idiot's corner. Ruby goes a little further. White coat syndrome is a trauma response to, for example, getting a traumatic diagnosis. It has measurable effects on heart rate and blood pressure in a clinical waiting room, so it's quite important to know about false readings. I spent my whole life thinking it was something else. I thought wrongly that white coat syndrome just meant you're more likely to trust someone in a white coat. So if a doctor tells you something, you're going to think well, they must know what they're talking about. But that's not what it is. My apologies, especially if you have taken my ignorance and bought into it in your own lives. 22 minutes after 11 is the time. Sarah's in Wigan. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm a midwife. I've been a midwife for 20 years. Worked in the NHS for a very long time.
Yes.
Worked up to a sister of a birth centre. And I left the NHS because of safety practices, system-led care. Could see that women and babies were put in dangerous situations. Tried to whistle blew twice, which was received well by the head nurses at the hospital. But when my immediate managers found out about it some months later, they tried to discipline me for inappropriate escalation.
Reputation protection, always. In any institution, actually, it's prioritised to a really dangerous degree, but in a maternity ward, particularly so. What were you most concerned about?
Things like one of the key things that was happening was I would run a birth centre, and my women would be made to walk past the doors of the birth centre so that they could go up to the delivery suite triage rooms, prove they were in labour, and the only proof they were allowed to give was an internal examination and how dilated the cervix is. And any midwife worth of salt will tell you that isn't the best gauge, and you have to look at her behaviour and how the contractions are, etc. So then they would be giving birth in a triage room at least a few times a month. Someone would give birth alone because their partner had gone to get a car or get bags or whatever it might be. And then they're birthing in a room that is not designed to give birth in, when we could have just walked them straight into a birth centre in a safe space.
But just be the devil's advocate for a minute and tell me why that happened. What someone defending or justifying that would offer up as their reason for doing it.
So it's always about staffing. So the number of we were always chronically short-staffed. It's something that happens all over. And what you mentioned earlier about women being told to stay at home as long as possible, and there is good evidence base for that. The rationale being that if you come into hospital in labour too early in the labour, we're more likely to get iatrogenic harm. So just being in the hospital, we're more likely to fiddle, you're more likely to have interventions that you didn't need.
Okay.
Whereas if you waited
there is a sort of logic to the policy, as it were, of having quite a high bar for admission, but it is imposed bluntly.
Yeah, and it's often done on because it's such a, we're caring for over 500,000 births a year, so you can understand how a very short-staffed, underfunded system has to prioritise systems. But this is a birthing process is not it's one of the worst processes, biological process you can then systemize. So to add numbers, like you were only in labour if you are 4 centimetres or more.
Yes. So you'd get rid of that rule, would you? Just simply just say, no, well, you need the bodies to do it, but there are so many other metrics you can use to decide on the urgency of the situation.
Well, you need the training and the midwife.
Well, I was just coming to that. So that I was going to say, what's changed most over the 20 years since you started, and it would be that some of the people coming through the system are arriving on the job with much less training than you had.
Yeah. We've known for years there was going to be a massive retirement, like a cohort due for retirement, and that happened. So we lost loads of senior staff, and then
why were they not just replaced by sort of dead men's shoes, if you pardon the pun? It's not a pun, but you know what I mean. So someone moves on and the next cohort move up.
Yeah, who knows? We also put off a lot of student midwives by then. When I trained, it was free. The NHS paid for my training. So we then made them go into debt to become midwives, and then COVID hit. So those students were then only seeing very medicalised care approaches.
Got it. Got it. Yes, whereas in fact you need a midwife even if your birth goes perfectly well.
Yeah.
Goes brilliantly. How would you fix that? And so you don't work in the NHS anymore, you work privately, do you?
Yeah, I work privately now. So, yeah, we work more like everyone's image of a call the midwife. That's what we're able to go back to doing, because we're not working for a system, we're working for a family.
And that probably is what the chief midwife is referring to when she says none of us think care is in the right place. Things are not good enough. And as with so much in life, if you've got the money, you'll be in a much happier situation than those who haven't. And not just money, but knowledge as well. You need to know what the options are and to listen to people. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry for what you went through. Bella is in Chiswick. Bella, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
To present my situation from someone who's actually in the healthcare profession. I'm a consultant at a hospital in London and chose to deliver in 2023 at the hospital I work at.
Right.
Thinking, having that background of knowledge, people, the hospital I work at, people that I know, trust, knowing the state of maternity care and how much
the hospital I work at is a good hospital, so of course I'm going to have my baby there, and people will know me as well, so I may even get a slightly better treatment than I would have done if they didn't.
Exactly. There aren't many perks as to, such say, to working in the NHS, but professional courtesy, we believe, hopefully, would be one of them. My husband was of the complete opposite opinion. Why would you want to deliver at somewhere where, lots of people know you? So we had a bit of a chat about that, but, obviously, my birth experience, he was happy to go along with it.
Yes.
Now, I unfortunately had my waters broke prior to going into labour. So something that then needs monitoring, because if left for too long before the baby delivers, you can develop infection and then sepsis.
Sure.
So I was told to come back at 24 hours after, waters had broken. I was in early labour but hadn't progressed enough, so needed something called, hormone dripping, etc., to push things along.
Yeah.
Now, I came back to hospital. I waited, I think, about 12 or 14 hours for a labour ward bed overnight.
Wow.
In an antenatal ward with, just walking around, pacing around on a bit of paracetamol for labour pain. Finally made it to labour ward just before 8 a.m. At the end of a midwife shift. And then I'll cut a long story short because it is a long one. Essentially developed sepsis anyway in the afternoon. Actually, the baby was getting distressed, things weren't progressing, my epidural was no longer working, and I had to have an emergency cesarean section, but with a general anaesthetic, which is pretty much unheard of. So I missed the birth of my baby.
I'm sorry.
It was all very rushed. I don't really remember seeing her for the first time. And then Sod's Law developed every complication of that known. So, I had hallucinations, delirium the first night with all the medications and the sepsis. I developed sort of ileus, my bowel stopped working, so I was in hospital for a week. Now, after the initial 24 hours of being on a high dependency ward, I was in the postnatal ward. So you can imagine, after an experience like that, being on a ward with 5 other mums, with 5 partners, with 5 crying babies, with multiple visitors all day and all night, a shoddy chair for your partner to sit on, and then trying to, breastfeed after having been so unwell. I couldn't actually get out of bed on my own because my hands were so bad. I had tendinitis as well, post antepartum. So, there was a day where I couldn't even get out of bed to use a loo in time, and because of my bowels, I became incontinent of urine, etc. So it was a really, really degrading experience.
Yes.
And the midwives around me, all they kept saying was, we're really short-staffed, we're really rushed off our feet, we can't manage, warning me at the beginning of the shift, please bear with us.
Should they have done that differently, if it was true? Oh, we've lost the phone line. I'm going to get Bella back up, actually, because, we are smack in the middle of the news as well. The time is 11:31, a little late, actually, for the headlines with Dominic Ellis.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. I can't really balance these conversations, but obviously most people do not have difficult or traumatic experiences when they go to hospital to have a baby. I hate the idea that you'll be listening to this and thinking, oh, Lord, I was nervous enough already. But we have to have these conversations, and I probably am guilty of not having had them enough because of a sort of rose-tinted gratefulness for the fact that, we got home safe and sound, even if things were a little bit suboptimal for us, but nowhere near as suboptimal as they were for Bella, who was in the middle of telling us her story just before the news. Bella, what would you have preferred those midwives to do? Working on the proviso or the presumption that they were massively overworked and understaffed, would you rather not? It just sounds like they conveyed that information in an unsatisfactory and unhelpful way. But what would you like them to have done differently?
No, I actually really felt for them.
Right.
It was in an apologetic way to say, look, I know I'm not going to be able to deliver the care that I would like to give.
Wow.
And they're so disillusioned.
Yes.
They're disillusioned. And maybe, most of them actually, I don't think, realised I was a doctor until later, or certain things I'd say, because, I didn't want them to feel pressured.
I'd have had a badge. I'd have had a badge. I'd have worn a badge saying, I'm a doctor. Get on your toes.
And to be honest, it was simple things like not giving my pain relief on time. I'd have to remind them in the middle of the night about medication I realised I hadn't been given, waking up in pain. And actually, what made me more upset, I'd like to think I'm reasonably resilient. So, as soon as I was home, I got on with things, I was fine. Maybe not entirely fine, but I was as fine as I could have been. What about women that can't advocate, that don't know, that don't understand? How would they have felt when I felt so awful?
Yeah.
And I'd just like to contrast that with, I had another birth experience. My husband was so upset, he was willing to, kind of find money from wherever to maybe even go privately for our second birth, because he was so traumatized he couldn't even walk into that hospital by the experience, because as a man, he felt he was almost completely sidelined and ignored as well, which, I hadn't quite appreciated at the time. So this time we had an elective cesarean section because of the complications. Everything went very smoothly. But again, I was in for 3 days and, not being given medication on time, having to remind them, him having to go out and ask for simple pain relief. And it's because they are just so, I don't know if it's just that they're overstretched, overworked. That's the only explanation I can think of. But I also think postnatal care is really lacking, and it's something that many women will tell you, and many healthcare professionals will tell you. The midwives are left floundering. All the effort is in the actual process of labour and the delivery.
Yes.
But what about the care afterwards for the people that, for women like me who it doesn't go swimmingly for?
We've gone backwards then. It's so strange. And of course, when you get home, there's even less postnatal care. I think you still get a visit. Do you still get a visit from a health visitor? But not.
I actually think that was pretty good.
That was okay, was it? Good.
The midwives called.
Okay.
I've had excellent midwifery care where I am with both deliveries. Absolutely fabulous.
Is it misogyny? And I don't mean it's like medical misogyny. If men gave birth, the system would be completely different from what is it, or is that too lazy?
I expect it would, but I feel like this isn't a new problem.
No.
For a decade or more, or even back to the 80s, I think about where I was born in the hospital, the maternity care was found to be, at fault there. And these reports come out all the time. There's always something lacking. There's things going wrong. How have we not been able to change this in 40 or 50 years? I was born in the 80s. Why are things not better?
Well, you tell me. You're the doctor.
I know. I think the staffing is an issue. I think motivation, I think morale is an issue. I think resources are an issue. For me to wait when I'm recognised that I could go into sepsis and have this outcome, I can't help but think, had I got in there earlier, would my birth experience with my firstborn be different? You know, something that you're so excited, and then obviously because of what happens, you're then at risk of all the complications I then developed. So my whole experience could have been entirely different, and I will never know now.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And of course, in the first instance, you just have more people, more trained people in position for both the during and the after.
Well, they need more labour ward beds to get women in a timely way. I know other people who've waited for 3 days on an antenatal ward, not in the same situation, but waiting for an induction. Taking up a bed and not being able to actually go into a labour ward bed. So...
More beds, more people, more training.
More beds, more people. But then, I mean, that's the state of the NHS in general, isn't it?
Yeah, but it feels more acute. Is it the same in your department? I mean, would you benefit from more beds and more bodies?
I think we are very lucky where I work, which I won't name.
No, of course.
But I think we're very lucky in that we're reasonably well-resourced. We have our issues, we have our challenges with sort of nursing staffing, especially at times, especially in the winter. But I'd say we're still in a much better position than other hospitals I know of.
And that adds, of course, to the patient's confusion and sense of not quite a postcode lottery, but not far off. Bella, thank you. I'm so sorry for what you went through. And yet, I can tell from my switchboard and from just the inbox response to what you've said that it is both a common and a triggering story that you tell. Lucy's in Brighton. Lucy, what would you like to say?
Hello, can you just go a bit gentle with me, because this might be a bit of a distressing story.
Okay. Of course I can. I'm bound to be gentle on a subject like this. It's not like you're ringing in to sing Nigel Farage's praises, is it, or something like that? I promise I'll be as gentle as possible.
So I've had 2 late second trimester losses.
Oh, Lucy.
So, sorry, that's a bit wobbly.
Okay.
So for the actual birth part, it was fine. I went in, I was induced to obviously have the baby. But after the birth, again, highlighting that there is no postnatal care. Women who have this situation happen, and I know a few women in my local area who this has happened to, frequently don't get any aftercare, any follow-up, and are just immediately discharged back to the GP. So my friend was discharged with a leaflet to say this is what happened, what will happen and all the rest of it. I wasn't even given said leaflet at that stage.
So you're confused, heartbroken and frightened?
Yes, absolutely. And so you're discharged back to your GP.
With all the other attendant issues that involves in the difficulties of getting seen and getting appointments and getting through the door in some cases.
So shortly after I had my first loss, I developed an allergic reaction to the medication that I was taking. I contacted my GP diligently, obviously. The GP wouldn't touch me because it wasn't medication they prescribed.
What did you need?
I just needed someone to put their arm around me and say, come on, let's help you, let's get you through this.
So it's another example of humanity not being part of the process, isn't it? And you can understand how it happened. Well, I can. It's obviously going to be much harder for you that they're prioritising people who are in medical need and completely abandoning people in your situation.
Absolutely. And so when I had the allergic reaction to the medication, the GP wouldn't touch me and sent me back up to the maternity hospital because they are the ones that prescribed the medication. I was put on a bed in the area of people giving birth to live babies.
Oh, no.
And whilst I was waiting for a consultant to come see me.
Yeah. That's unbearable. That's unthinkable.
This is the situation that we find ourselves in, who have lost babies.
You've come on after a doctor, so there's a little bit of me that's sort of wondering if we have any understanding of why, but it's not that hard, I don't think, to work out. It's a system that's overburdened and understaffed and geared entirely to medical need, and also geared to getting people out of there as quickly as possible, regardless of what their outcome was in the ward. That's just, I can't think of a worse set of circumstances for someone to find themselves in than what you went through.
So this is the situation, and so I was discharged back to the GP after our last loss, which was in April this year.
Right.
And to deal with the sick note and all the rest of it, because obviously after such such a traumatising experience again.
Yeah.
And I had a 5-minute appointment with the GP to go through everything that had happened, of which I had to relive both births to back to the CP.
Could they have... I mean, that again is going to be the... No, they could just say, I'm staying with this woman for a little bit longer, and everyone else will have to wait. Or even how could they schedule a 5-minute slot for something that would be obviously need more, would need longer?
But that was what was given to me, and it's just the postnatal care is lacking. It's lacking.
It's non-existent. It's not just lacking, it's non-existent in some of these cases, in your case.
It's completely non-existent, and I'm kind of lucky because I've had a psychological health appointment with the hospital that they've arranged and all the rest of it, but there was still no medical care afterwards. My babies were in the second trimester, which meant that they weren't small.
No, I understand.
And there wasn't even a 6-week check afterwards to check that everything was healing and all the rest of it from that experience. It's literally...
Would they say that there aren't enough cases like yours to justify a protocol or personnel being... I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm sorry.
I don't know, but...
Nor do I. You just want to think there's some method in this apparent madness, but it wouldn't be any comfort to you if there was, would it?
I don't... it's just heartbreaking because I know that other women are going through it as well.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm so sorry that you were in a position to do so, but it highlights precisely, A, what we're talking about, and B, why we're talking about it, Lucy.
Okay, but thank you very much for letting me share.
Don't thank me, thank you for sharing. And I sometimes find myself embarrassed by the inability of saying anything helpful or encouraging, positive at the end of conversations like this. But as I said a moment ago, that sometimes that is the point. Lucy, take care. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's a lot of love coming in for all the callers. I should stress. But you do, I sometimes wonder whether the question even needs asking. Are you looking at why things are so bad? Then underfunding and under-resourcing are going to be top of the list. But that's why the report Panorama has about the NHS Trust in Nottingham is so concerning, because it's not, it is clearly about people, not about process, not about resources or about staffing. If you've decided to write FOH on a whiteboard next to a pregnant woman's name, and the F stands for the F word and the OH stands for off home, then you're carrying... I don't think I'm over-reading this or overthinking it. It means you're carrying an attitude to the women that you're supposed to care for. And listen, if that's not where you were or who you were when you decided to become a midwife or when you decided to work on a maternity ward, you would never have contemplated. It might sometimes only take one or two people in a system, in an institution, who step back, or who perhaps, if we were to be a little bit more generous, are suffering from empathy fatigue. But I bet that's contagious. If you're running out of empathy because it's all used up, and you know that some professions are exposed to horrors that not encourage necessarily, but they will talk about things in a way that we would find quite weird and possibly quite upsetting, but they're doing it in order to insulate themselves against trauma. They're doing it, when I was a kid, the junior doctors, the student doctors, you'd hear all sorts of stories about what the medical students got up to. And part of it was about almost desensitising the work that they did so that they could do the work that they did and see a job on the table in front of them as opposed to a human being. So there's all sorts of reasons why medical professionals don't behave in the way that we naively think that they should or would when we've never been near the sharp end of a medical procedure. But I just wonder how it takes hold institutionally. So in a school or in a hospital, how many people need to be bad for the institution to become bad? Don't be too kind, staff would say to each other, because if you're too kind, then they'll stick around for too long or they'll come back too quickly. It's a funny one. Hayley is in Borehamwood. Hayley, what would you like to say?
Hi there, thank you for having me. I also wanted to say a shout out to all the other women that have contacted you and partners. Say, really brave to come forward and talk, everybody's hearing your story, and it's really important. And I hope for those that haven't had closure that they get the closure they need.
Yes.
My story's a bittersweet one. I have 2 children. And neither were straightforward.
Okay.
I want to say that I am all for the NHS, even though I had negative experiences both times.
Yeah.
If I had a third, I would still be going via NHS. I'd probably still be at the same hospital. My first, I was originally meant to be at one hospital that really messed me around. It was the summer of 22 when it was 40 degrees. It's a hospital with no aircon. And all these pregnant women were sat in a waiting room for their appointments without even being allowed to have the window door open because it was like end of COVID.
Right. Oh, Lord. Well, that's no one's fault, is it? It's just hideous.
No, it was awful. I was known as the lady that came in with the fan. I used to bring my own fan with. But there was one occasion my husband and I went in to find out about our birthing options and things like epidural and the space that we would be having the baby in. And we were literally waited 2.5 hours. We both took the day off of work to go. And when we walked into the room, we were literally handed a 2-inch strip of paper with a PDF web link and told to go home and look it up ourselves. And I was like, sorry, what? Like, I was fuming. I actually had an ad.
Go on. No, I'm just spluttering. You carry on.
It's all right. And that evening I had an antenatal class, and my antenatal teacher is actually a midwife at my other local hospital.
Right.
And she said, are you happy there? And I said, no. She goes, you can transfer. I was like, I'm 37 weeks pregnant. How do I transfer this late? She said, you just fill in this form. And that night I was transferred. The problem was they couldn't give me an outpatient appointment until after my due date to do the onboarding as a new pregnant woman. So they put me on the ward in a private room because it was end of COVID, and they couldn't do COVID tests quick enough. Put me in a private room on the ward for best part of 9 days. I think I went home for a day in the middle so they could do the full onboarding during the morning rounds.
Right.
I was taking up a bed on the maternity ward.
How much of this was COVID related, do you think? How much of this was caused?
I have no idea. It was September 22. I mean, we were at the tail end of
but still,
COVID.
Protocols were in place, weren't they?
Yeah, it was a bit bizarre. Like, I was still expected to wear a mask and things like that. But my husband was allowed in hospital. So it was a bit of a mix. But I went home, came back, and I had my baby. Yes. But I had something called precipitant labour, which means it happens exceptionally fast.
Right.
And from the moment they burst my waters to the baby being born was something like 27 minutes or something like that.
Gosh, that is quick.
And I had an out-of-body experience, and I don't remember any of it.
Right.
Following that, we were kept in hospital for another day because I had strep B, which, if a baby contracts it, they could get meningitis. Now, the strep B test is not offered on the NHS, and it's one of the biggest causes of infant meningitis. You have to pay privately to have that test.
So you did?
And the only reason I knew about it is because my community midwife was a strong advocate to get the test. My community midwife had the same one for both children. She is a goddess. And, again, NHS staff. But what they do in the community in comparison to what's going on in the hospitals is just worlds apart. Weirdly, my antenatal teacher who worked in that hospital I transferred to happened to be on shift and helped deliver the baby, which is really special. But at the same time, she did leave.
It's pure luck, isn't it?
Yeah, but she also had to leave her birthing lady, who was not in active labour at the time, left her lady to come see me.
Right.
And she actually was the one that called the buzzer during my birth that meant 15 people rushed in. Because the person that was dealing with me didn't.
If we had to pinpoint precisely what the key problems were that made your experience so
that point, they sent me home, my baby was floppy and unresponsive, and we went back in via A&E. Because they sent me home too early.
Right.
She had really, really bad jaundice. Thankfully, with food and blue light therapy, she was fine. But that left me very traumatised. And when it came to baby number 2,
I didn't realise I had such severe PTSD that I genuinely wasn't sure what was going to happen when I went into hospital. And it sparked a whole new world of how to deal with the pregnancy. Right. Now, we were taught you can advocate for yourself. If you don't like your midwife, you ask for a different midwife.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, well, in theory, it could have happened, but the situation I was in, again, was quite extreme.
Frightened as well. I mean, it's such a sort of drawing attention to yourself. These kind of scenarios are
I mean, I actually think we had a very good rapport, my husband and I, with the staff on the antenatal ward, the ward on pre and post giving birth.
Yeah.
They all knew my situation. They all knew I had fast labours. They all knew what was going on and that I was adamant on getting the epidural because of what happened the first time, etc. And when it came to it, I was in active labour by 6 p.m. and they didn't get me over to the labour ward till 9 p.m. because the labour ward were A, on break, and B, then doing staff handover. In that time, I had a placental abruption, and my labour was so crazy at that point, they had to do a spinal because I didn't have enough time for the epidural.
What should have been done differently? I mean, there's so much to process here. We won't have time.
They shouldn't have delayed taking me over to labour ward, and that was no part on anyone other than the labour ward. The ward I was on was pushing me. They were calling every 5 minutes to push me over.
We can't have
and
it.
Eventually, my midwife put me in a wheelchair and took me over to labour ward and said, deal with her.
Because
she needs to give birth.
Yes.
And I was then, because it was such a rush thing, my midwife for the labour wasn't ready for me and was quite rude. And my husband and I actually said, we're not happy with her, find us someone else. But time was not on our side. And in the end, we had a doctor. She still did the birth, but a doctor supervised because she was not pleasant to deal with. She also had an argument with the anaesthetist in front of me. It was very unprofessional. Mm-hmm. But the doctor ended up supervising. So I felt at ease.
Good.
And then after that, it was a very streamlined birth. I mean, it had its own complications, but because we were able to advocate for ourselves,
and then again we
felt at ease.
Yeah, and we're back to worrying about people who'd be less able or less comfortable doing that, and a path not taken is. I'm so sorry. I mean, I don't even know what to say. There's so much to pick through there, so much to process. But simple case of advocating for yourself being something that is crucial to all of these experiences, and it's not something that everybody can do. And of course, some women are there on their own as well, which makes them even less likely to be able to muster up a sort of response to the suboptimal treatment that you're receiving. And I stress again, there are obviously countless happy stories, but the whole point about the news is that it brings you the stuff that shouldn't be happening, or the stuff that is surprising. And it is obviously hugely important that our maternity care, as the chief midwife concedes, is far from perfect.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 4 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I did mention at 10 o'clock that it's not a motoring topic, it's actually a pedestrian topic, and I quite like pedestrian topics. It's the motoring topics I can't bear. I can't think of a way in to that news that you just heard Natasha talking about in the bulletin, except to point out that if it was the other way round, if the current government had somehow been left with a £100 million bill for the absolute nonsense of a policy that the last government tried to introduce with regards to processing applications in Rwanda, then it would be front pages galore tomorrow. As it is, I suspect the fact that the UK government has succeeded in court resisting that call for £100 million, it won't get anything like the coverage that we're currently giving it. I'd love to be proven wrong. I may well be. I somehow doubt it. But the UK has won a court case over that collapsed deal. I think, and it was a 3-day hearing in the Netherlands. This is why international courts are sometimes rather obviously necessary. The Hague's Permanent Court of Arbitration has concluded that Rwanda is not entitled to any of the forms of relief it seeks. So a big £100 million victory for the British government as it sought to clean up the... Can any remember how much was spent on the Rwanda plan that didn't involve the forced deportation of a single person to that country? But it was hundreds of millions more. So the idea that the current government would be left with a £100 million bill for cleaning up the mess of the last government is, I don't know, it feels quite timely, doesn't it? It's very much of a piece with the state of political discourse and politics in general in this country at the moment. So I've got a thing, right, that really bugs me. Like, really bugs me. And historically, things that really bug me are not necessarily things that really bug you. You remember Sheila gets very, very irritated about people listening to things loudly on public transport. I hate that as well. But some things get under your skin even more than they get under other people's skins. And some things get under your skin even more than other things do that are equally obnoxious. I was talking to a colleague this morning about people being noisy in quiet carriages. Something about people being noisy in quiet carriages boils my blood in a way that people being noisier in non-quiet carriages don't. There's a sort of level of obnoxiousness attached to people knowing that they're in an area where they're supposed to be quiet and then watching a football game on their phone or just having a loud conversation. It's just like you can see the sign on the window. You're supposed to be quiet. And I don't know what it is. It's a psychological, because that's in a quiet carriage. So that's in. But anyway, so I will no longer sit in quiet carriages in case there's someone, because I will be more annoyed by noise in a quiet I digress. I'm also weird, obviously. And then some things. What would be the best example of something that should never have been allowed to happen, but was so widespread? I'm thinking of the internet, I suppose. It was all so widespread by the time anybody tried to do anything about it that it was pretty much too late to do anything about it. It's where the phrase getting the genie back in the bottle comes from. But I mean, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I mean, there is nothing more boring than a radio phone-in that involves people ringing in to say, why aren't cyclists insured, right? That's just one of life's great, abiding, eternal truths. Why aren't cyclists insured? There's nothing... And also, almost every cyclist is also a motorist. So this ludicrous 1970s style attempt to distinguish between cyclists and motorists is not only stupid, it's also profoundly dishonest. But I can feel all of the things that I find ridiculous and repellent in other people bubbling to the surface of my consciousness when I am either exposed to or thinking about the vehicles on our roads that are powered but which are not in any way, shape or form regulated. I don't even know what the law is with regards to these things, but the idea that you can get onto the road on a bicycle or a scooter that has an engine in it or a motor in it and bomb around at extraordinary speeds seems to me to be something that we have been, if you pardon the pun, that we have been profoundly asleep at the wheel about. That they are so obviously dangerous. I don't want to say stupid. So as soon as I start talking about this, I don't even know what the correct terminology is. Am I talking about e-bikes? I am, aren't I? E-bikes and e-scooters. So round my way, there's a lot of food deliveries going on all the time. And everywhere you go, every time you try and cross the road, every time you leave your own house, there's someone bombing past much faster than you could go on a pedal bicycle. And I just think that we are probably going to reach a point in the not too distant future where we have to undo an awful lot of the stuff that has now been done, an awful lot of the stuff that has been allowed to go unnoticed. But you see, as soon as I say this, I think of someone I know who has one of these scooters, is one of the hardest working people I know. He bombs from job to job on it. puts in shifts the like of which you and I have never seen, have never done, and it saves him an absolute fortune in public transport. He just plugs it in when he gets home, and it takes him where otherwise he would be going by bus and by tube. I need to make it clear what I'm talking about, don't I? It's not a motoring phone-in. It's about these bikes and scooters. There's a story in the news today about the victim of a crash being in despair at the fact that there's no recourse under the law. There's also no sort of third-party insurance policies. That even includes the bike share operators, let alone the one-off users of these machines who don't have any real responsibility or liability when, as one poor woman has experienced, you can be badly injured. This woman has had been thrown face first into a brick wall in Carshalton after being hit by one of these bikes going at full speed on the pavement. But they're not the ones I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the ones that are like brand names. I mean, is it just me, or are they everywhere? Absolutely everywhere. I'm talking about not the Lime bikes or the Forest bikes, which have got a whole heap of problems of their own, where you kind of have to pedal and then the engine kicks in a little bit. I'm talking about the people who are bombing around London, where I live, and I imagine it's happening where you live as well, on vehicles that are absolutely motor-powered, engine-powered, in an entirely... The word I want is impunity. So here's my problem, right? If you don't know this about me, that's perfectly reasonable. I'm kind of allergic to motoring as a conversational topic. It's up there with parking tickets. It's up there with smart motorways. I know it's anathema to the radio phone because so many people listen to programmes like this in cars. I get that. This is, to me, not a motoring topic because I'm on foot almost all the time. I do all of my travelling pretty much on foot and via public transport or on a bicycle, on an actual push bike, a bicycle. I used to like the Lime bikes until I came off one and smashed my head open and I found it a little bit hard to get. I also realised that they weren't helping me get fit at all. Do you know that? I mean, I was riding them to and from work last summer or the summer before, and it didn't make the blindest bit of difference to my overall health because the engine kicks in or the motor kicks in at precisely the point that you would be... I think it is like legal highs, Anthony says. Do you remember when we suddenly all started getting upset about... What was it? I can't remember what it was called. The thing that you found in a plant fertiliser and the kids were getting off their faces on it all the time. And it turned out that it's ephedrine. It should never have been allowed to take hold. But by the time it took hold, it was almost too late to do something about it. This is what I want to know. Because the problem I've got is not having this vocabulary or this language of road use. Am I going mad? Or is this absolutely appalling? 0345 6060 973. That's what I'm asking you. Am I missing something huge here because I don't use the roads? I'm not a big motorist. Or is it objectively insane that we have people of all ages? It's not a kid problem. We've got people of all ages bombing around our streets on vehicles that are powerful, to my untutored eye, without any helmets, without any regulation, just method drone it was, not effort. There we go. We got there in the end. Or am I missing something? So I don't fully understand what the law is. That's the first thing that you can help me with on 0345 6060 973. I don't understand who is breaking the law and who isn't. I presume they all are. Even the people doing the deliveries, if they're on a lecture, I don't know. But it seems to me incredible that you've got all of these... They don't have registration plates on them. They are driving around at speed. They're working for companies that are making huge sums of money, but the company, if it hits you one of these bikes, isn't going to be responsible for paying. There's no... you see what I mean, right? So it's perfectly possible this will be the shortest phone-in history and we'll move on to something else entirely because I am missing the point and it is not what I think it is. But what interests me most about this, 0345 6060 973, is the thing that I always love talking with you about, the stuff that's grown up around us that is by the time we realise how bad it is, by the time we realise how serious stroke stupid this is, it's halfway around the world. It's grown up so much and so quickly that the moment at which we should all have just shouted, stop, this can't go on, is probably behind us. So I'm not alone. I can't possibly be alone in thinking that this is both hideous and dangerous. 03456060973. What, is it too late to do anything about it? Is it too late to do anything about it? Because so many people now rely upon them. If they banned them entirely tomorrow and you tried to order a curry tonight, it probably wouldn't arrive for 2 hours. Do you see what I mean? Is it now so baked into our system that we're never going to get it out again? So that's the main question. I don't want phone-ins about people driving badly, ever, all right? But what I do want is a social question of whether or not this thing is as absolutely insane as I have increasingly convinced myself it is. I'm turning into one of those people who is sort of... Yeah, I go with the Victor Meldrew for listeners of a certain age. I'm turning into one of those people who can't even see these things without feeling a sort of little rising bile in my... I get off! And yet, my food was delivered by them last night. I had a burger last night. Well, anyway, I've articulated enough for you to get your teeth into. Can we do anything about it? And am I alone in thinking that we've allowed something obviously... Have we got any statistics? Have we seen any statistics on this stuff? We've allowed something that is obviously and ridiculously wrong to become completely normal. So either tell me to give my head a wobble or tell me how on earth we've allowed this to happen. 03456060973. There it is. We got there in the end. It's something that is so obviously and ridiculously wrong, I can't quite believe how normal it's become. So I want your opinions and I want your explanations. And also suggestions if you're feeling like it. Similar things. So legal highs I'd put on the list when we suddenly started discovering the damage that they were doing, and it felt like, the world and his wife were taking them already. But what is it? What would be the thing? I don't know. But anyway, there you go. There's plenty to get your teeth into. It's 12:17.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is. I know why I'm uncomfortable with this subject. The first, there's three reasons. Reason number one, I could be just wrong, and it's the fact that I'm a little bit allergic to motoring-related issues that makes me wonder whether everyone's listening to this thinking, what a wombat, James. You really got to get over yourself. But number two is I don't want to turn into a something must be done merchant. Something must be done, while sort of quietly knowing that nothing can be done. These are all the things I'm kind of allergic to as a radio presenter. But the truth of the matter is that I become Victor Meldrew when I encounter these things. And what I want to pin down is, A, whether or not I am right to respond in this way, and B, what on earth we're going to do about it. Because I've done more than enough introducing. You can do some talking now. Melvin's in Ladbroke Grove. Melvin, what's going on?
Hi, James. Apologies for my lack of voice. I was at the Arsenal parade.
Oh. You and 80... How many was it? 800,000 people?
Yeah, near enough.
That's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic. It was fantastic.
Well done. I mean, shame about the other night, but still.
We moved. We do. Okay. So, talking about cycling, I do think the problem is the fact that the legislation came in after these bikes were in the marketplace, and that allowed them to just become everywhere. So that's kind of the issue.
What is the legislation?
Okay, so there's two parts. So the first thing is like
you are so croaky. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So there's two parts. The first one is the bike has to be pedal-assisted powered, which means if at any point the bike is propelled without the use of pedal power, it's illegal.
Well, that's all of them.
No, it's not all of them. It's like I said, if it's pedal assisted in some way.
No, but that's all of them that aren't line bikes and forest bikes.
Correct, actually, yeah.
Pretty much.
So that's all of them, and you can spot that a mile off.
Yeah, of course you can. So they're all illegal?
All of them, without question.
Unless you're riding it on private land?
Unless you're riding it on private land. The second part of it is they're not allowed to have a motor over 250 watts. If they do, that's illegal. Now, you can only check that by stopping the bike, But the police, and I see this all the time, I've seen these bikes cruise past police cars and the police do nothing. So the police just generally don't have an appetite to check these vehicles unless they've set up a checkpoint station. And that's the only time I've ever seen police checking for
And what were they
bikes.
doing? What were they doing at that station? Were they just telling people, sorry, you better get a bus home, we're keeping this?
Do you know what? I've not stuck around to see, but I've... You know, in the same way that they do random insurance checks for cars.
Yeah. No, I've seen that.
Yeah.
What's your interest in it? Why do you know so much about it? We've spoken before.
We have. In my previous life, I was a semi-professional cyclist, so I cycle a lot.
Okay.
I also have an electric bike, which is completely legal. But also, I'm an avid road user. I like using roads. I like cycling. I like driving, and it's a very carefully balanced ecosystem. And I think one of the big problems about the roads are, if you've got a vast number of people on these electric bikes that are illegal,
yes,
operating like motor vehicles but aren't actually licensed, they're creating problems for everybody. So at that point, either you've got to do more to take these illegal vehicles off the road, or you go the other way and say, fine, you have to have a license in order to use them.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think, I mean, certainly in my part of town, so many of the delivery drivers, who must be some of the hardest working people in the city, particularly the weather that we've had at the back end of last week. I mean, I wouldn't want to do that job in a month of Sundays, but they're not your typical. So you see some kid go past at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you sort of have absolutely no problem in disapproving of that. But you see an adult who is incredibly hardworking, breaking the law in this way, you get a bit torn because you're sort of thinking, well, would they be able to do their job if they didn't have this vehicle, even though the vehicle is illegal?
Well, as I say, that's when you go the other way and you say, fine, you have to have a license for it. You have to tax the vehicle. You have to make sure it's completely roadworthy.
This is a stupid question.
Difficult to do.
This is a stupid question. Where do they come from? Are they all bought online and then they're delivered to your house? Or are there shops that just know they're breaking the law and they're selling them?
Originally, they were all online. Certainly when I got mine during lockdown, even though it's legal, it was only online. But now there are a number of shops all over London where you can get them very easily.
And they are all breaking the law?
They are all... Do you know what? No, they're not. This is the funny thing.
You can sell one. It's not illegal to sell one because I could be using it on private land.
Absolutely. That's another part of the legislation, which is a massive loophole.
We need a copper, don't we? We need some police to come on and tell us what their relation... I mean, it can either be the force's policy or it could just be your personal view of them. Is there a danger that I mean... And I don't want to include you in this, but do I just sound a bit old and stupid? And it's, you've got to move with the times and this is the new thing and you might as well be opposed to the motor car replacing the horse or do you know, that's why there's three reasons I worry about.
I hear what you're saying. And I think it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Yes, you kind of do sound a little bit old.
Yeah.
But I do think you have I do think you have an absolutely valid point. I don't think they're going anywhere, but as a result of them not going anywhere, we need to do more to make sure that they're integrated properly into the ecosystem that we have on our roads.
I mean, I think the reason I've got this weird lump of gristle in my brain on this subject is because it is so widespread. You almost can't quite believe that it is so obviously wrong and so illegal. And the less comfortable you are with motoring subjects or road-based subjects, the more you start thinking it might be a you problem rather than a they problem. But Melvin sort of puts my mind at rest on one front. I mean, but it's an extraordinary reality that I'm describing. And I presume it's true everywhere. It's not just a London thing. But you're talking about armies of road users who are all breaking the law with absolute impunity on a daily basis and putting us all at risk. And yet, I mean, I don't know why it makes me feel like Victor Meldrew to really complain about it. Emma's been in touch. She says, James, this is really boring. And I take your point, and that's what worries me, because I think all road-based conversations are boring. But this is actually, I'm failing in communicating to you why this isn't boring. It's boring until you get hit by one, right? Is that it? It's boring until you get hit by one? And the more it happens and the more it proliferates, the more likely you are to get hit by one. It's an illegally... I don't know. Why? Why has it been allowed to take over in such an enormous way unless authorities have decided it's not? It might actually be technically illegal, but it's not that big a problem anyway. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. John's in Nuneaton. John, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
I'm going to ask you to calm down, my friend.
It's very boring. It can't be both. It can't be excited and boring at the same time, John. That's physically impossible.
Oh, dear.
Go on.
Dear. Oh, well, yes. Well, let's start from this. I think the electric vehicles, cars, scooters, bikes, motorbikes, mopeds, they're absolutely brilliant. They're quiet, they're clean, they're absolutely
And they're
fantastic.
legal, are they?
Said, they are mostly illegal as well.
You can't be in favour of illegal things.
Well, the point is, let's make them legal.
Right.
The trouble is that always, and there's a number of other examples which you're asking for, where we just way behind with the legality and the enforcement of any law to do with these things.
Yes.
We have to wait until it's all been thrown out into the public. The technology is thrown out into the public, and we love it. We use it, and then there's no regulation on it.
This is the thing that interests me most, actually. This idea that my reaction to it is just completely out of kilter with the reality of it. As I'm kind of conjuring up a mythical threat that is simply born of the fact that it's both new and unregulated, but actually the threat is close to non-existent.
Yeah, and the trouble is, in the end, that there will be people who will exploit that and use it for, criminal purposes or whatever. But you see, I mean, we had in our main road here two lads on electric bikes, mopeds really, with throttles. That's the point. They have throttles. They're not pedal assisted. They're throttle driven.
But are you defending those as well?
No. Well, if they were properly used, they're like mopeds or motorbikes. They're the same sort of thing. But these two lads went just doing wheelies down the main road.
No, I don't care about that. As I said, I don't want conversations about antisocial behaviour. I'm interested. Okay. I'm interested in the technology and whether or not we should be sitting on it, stamping down on it, or whether or not. And I mean, look, I'll be honest with you, John. This is an entirely vanity-based inquiry. This phone in. I just want to know whether or not I'm actually right to feel the way that I do, or silly. And so far in this conversation, I'm not sure what your answer to that question is.
I think you're dead right, and we just got to regulate them better so that we can make them safer and purposeful.
So how have we got to a place? How on earth have we got to a place where I can't? I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I don't know what it's like in Nuneaton, but if I walk to Morrison's, which is 400 yards from my front door, I'll see 20.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe not every day. I'll see 10. There'll be 5 parked outside, loading up with groceries to take somewhere else. There'll be a couple going past. They are absolutely everywhere. I don't understand how something that everybody knows is illegal has taken such a stranglehold on our streets.
Because the trouble is, as well, the police can't catch them. How do they? You see one whizzing by. What do you do? What do the police do? They can't run after them. They can't chase them in cars.
Pull them all over. So I mean, okay. So it is just a new reality that's never going to change and is.
Well, it's the sort of reality which chasing our tails, trying to keep up with it.
Yeah.
You asked for other examples.
Yes, I did.
One is social media. The internet's thrown out at us.
I said that, John.
Social media,
it is. It's exactly like that. I mean, the threats feel much more acute now with social media than they do with these bikes. And I don't have any statistics for accidents, because who would keep the records, of course? If there's no insurance companies involved, where would the records be of how often it happens? But thank you. I mean, that's helpful. The problem I've got is this weird sense of articulating something that is simultaneously obvious and ignored. There it is. We got there in the end. It's like this thing that's absolutely enormous, and it's smack in front of us, and it shouldn't be, but it is, so nobody's cross about it. Well, it just is, isn't it? It just is. It's 12:31. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. What have I got for you in the final half an hour of the programme? I have got an unhinged headline. One of the most extraordinary unhinged headlines that I have ever come across. It's an absolute humdinger. I've got that little clip of the American politician nailing Donald Trump's obsession with sticking his name on everything, and held over. I've had complaints I've had. for holding over from Friday an extraordinary attempt by Richard Tice to challenge, who is one of Nigel Farage's donors who got a job with the party, attempting to justify his opposition to climate change. So there's quite a lot to get through. And more on this after the very latest headlines with Matt Hewitt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
£700 million, I think, Yvette Cooper revealed when she got into government, that the last lot had spent on that so-called Rwanda scheme, which was, I mean, the ridiculousness of it was visible from space. I remember when Ian Duncan Donuts was doing the rounds of the studios and made it absolutely clear that he didn't know what the scheme was. He thought they were going to be deporting failed asylum seekers to Rwanda, whereas in fact the plan was to process the applications in Rwanda before anybody had even failed or succeeded as an asylum seeker. And something really hideous about politicians defending something that they completely don't understand. And then when it's been explained to them that they are defending something completely different from what's actually happening, they don't change their position. Oh, no, that's fine too. That's completely different from what you said was fine a minute ago. So the £100 million penalty that the Labour government faced for undoing it and pulling out of it, having seen precisely zero successful applications of the legislation, has now failed in an international court. We'll have to wait until tomorrow to see what kind of coverage that gets. But speaking of coverage, I just wanted to share something with you from Private Eye magazine this week, which is, I wouldn't have, I mean, because it's in Private Eye, it gives me a different relationship to almost all other media. They're doing a thing we do, actually, and pointing out that the Mail, the Telegraph and the Express are now pretty much interchangeable. And it is an unhinged headline. Worst nightmare becomes reality. And then listen to this. This is in Private Eye. Broken Britain faces its most terrifying crisis yet as things under Keir Starmer's Stalinist government are beginning to go slightly right. The horrible news that inflation had unexpectedly fallen was followed by net migration plummeting and the economy growing at the fastest pace in the G7, meaning that our prediction about Starmageddon destroying the country forever was beginning to make us look a little hysterical. The only option now, and remember, the Private Eye is furiously impartial. You can love Private Eye and still get really, really annoyed with it when it goes after someone or something that you like, because it is the very definition of impartial in a proper sense, not in a, oh, we'll let the liars lie in order to balance out the people telling the truth. The only option now is to admit that we've been exaggerating wildly about everything, or we could insist that this relatively good news is the clearest sign yet that the Starmer apocalypse is coming very shortly, just after this temporary blip of positive economic indicators gives way to mutant zombies infected with Ebola and hantavirus roaming the country, eating our babies and forcing us to rejoin the EU. So yes, let's go with that. And sometimes you need to see someone else doing something to recognise that you're not going mad, don't you? So Private Eye there, reflecting what I think has been going on over the last couple of weeks. You've found myself, particularly on the immigration numbers, which are good news for the racists. It's not necessarily good news for the country, but it's good news for and not even just the racists, the immigrant obsessives, which is pretty much all of our media. And I asked you on the day those numbers were published, why aren't they celebrating? They started telling lies about a brain drain and telling lies about young people all moving to Dubai, when in fact I think the three countries to which more people are remigrating or emigrating, as opposed to immigrating, were Poland, Romania and Bangladesh. But that's extraordinary when the satirists are getting it quite so right. And it hints with the unhinged headline that I've got for you in a minute, because I don't know what they're so scared of at the moment, and I want to try to work out why. But we are breaking with tradition by having a conversation that is about road users. But it's also about everybody else. And I have failed utterly. I don't necessarily agree with Emma's analysis, but I failed utterly to communicate what I'm feeling about this story. Because I can't quite put it into words. We're talking about the powered machines that are bombing around our streets. And the sense I have that they are absolutely ridiculous and profoundly dangerous, but there are now so many of them everywhere, I can't help thinking, that maybe there's something wrong with me rather than something wrong with them. Because if there was something wrong with that, if the situation was as bad as it feels to me to be, then they, by which I mean the grown-ups, the people in authority, would surely have done something about it. Rod's in Barnet. Rod, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, James.
Hello,
I haven't spoken before. I'm a retired Met Police traffic officer. I served over 20 years as a career constable in the traffic department. And since retirement in 98, I haven't really driven uptown until a few weeks ago.
Right.
And I took my wife up to Bart's Hospital. She had a spell in there. I was fine. Everything's good now.
I'm glad to hear it.
But I could not believe my eyes. I went past the police stations closed. There's Barnet closed because I live in Barnet. Whetstone gone. The traffic patrol garage in Finchley gone. Finchley Police Station gone. Highgate gone.
Well, these aren't addressing the issue. I mean,
No, not yet. But the issue is that there's nobody out there policing the streets. That's what the issue is. There's no traffic patrols anymore.
Is that the issue?
It is the issue.
Is that the issue?
I believe it is, yeah.
So,
certainly.
I just file this under...
When I was traffic patrol, we'd have been out there stopping these people, dealing with it, and getting them into court. And getting them off the road.
Well, here's the problem, right? I mean, you're almost certainly right on one front, at least. But it's going to take it's going to take 4 years to get someone to court for burglary or sex assault at the moment. So the likelihood of anyone having an appetite for putting, and I could find you probably 100 by the end of it's only 20 to 1. I could find you 200 by 1 o'clock today. The idea that we're going to add all of them to the queue of people waiting for their day in court is. I mean, regardless of what we might think about funding and resources and personnel numbers, that's never going to happen, and you don't want it to happen either.
No, but what did strike me...
did you notice how many there were, Rod?
How many? Oh, God, yeah. And not even talking about the cyclists.
Because I'm surprised you noticed that. You're too busy counting empty police stations. Did you? I mean, were you struck by the proliferation of these actual vehicles?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I came... there's one guy overtook me in the Holloway Road, right down the middle of the road. He wasn't on motorised stuff. He was on line boots. But he was doing about 20 miles an hour on these line boots going down the hill down Holloway Road.
Boot?
Well, it's a roller skate, but but it's got wheels in a straight line along the boot.
Oh, okay. So he wasn't. Well, he was just roller skating. We can't ban roller skating. This is going the way of all motoring-related phone-ins now.
And then a little further on, Caledonian Road, coming towards me, overtaking a bus, was a man riding a wheel. Yeah, I know. That's what I thought too, a wheel. But this was a motorised wheel with stirrups either side of the axle.
Here's the thing. I quite like those. No, they're they're powered unicycles. I quite like those. They look quite cool, but they are part of the problem we're describing. How do you know, Rod, that you and I'm not going to lie to you, we might be the ones that are out of touch here?
Well, we might be.
What is the problem?
Be an age thing.
What is the danger? It's not an age thing because I'm much younger than you. How do we know that it's immensely dangerous?
Well, you've only got to see, you've only got to watch them, the positions that they put themselves in around high vehicles and tall vehicles. It's not fair to bus drivers and lorry drivers for a start, let alone the pedestrians that they come into contact with.
Well, you mean you say that? You're putting me off the topic, to be honest with you, Rod.
Oh, well, never mind.
No, I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean it is sounding like a motoring topic now, isn't it? It's awful and something must be done. But we don't know what. And
the genie's out of the bottle.
The genie's out of the bottle and there aren't enough police officers.
One of yours, isn't it?
And we've got... Yeah. And why are all those... I mean, listen, if every police station from here to Barnet was open, it wouldn't be stopping these bikes from bombing up and down the road, would it?
Not until you got officers on the street actually dealing with it, no.
I don't know.
And the other thing I did notice...
Talk about Brexit instead.
Sorry, go on. The other thing I did notice was on my journeys up to Bart's and back, not once did I see a uniform. Now, in my day, when I joined, there were 20,000 uniforms.
Yeah,
nowadays there's over 33,000. I don't know where they all are, but I know where they're not.
They're hiding from you. They heard you were in town.
Well, they're certainly not out on the streets, aren't they?
They heard you were in town, so they all went, I don't know, they all went to Greg's. Listen, obviously some of the points you make are valid. I don't know. It's just this sense that we're looking at something absolutely enormous that's new, and with the greatest of love and respect, you made it sound like something that's not new at all. But by going back to those well-trodden themes about not enough bobbies on the beat and shutting down the police station counters, and if it is just part of that process, then it isn't something that I should be talking about. I just think it feels a little bit different from that. It feels a little bit, I don't know quite what the word is that I'm looking for. It's, I don't know, how long can I get away with that? Doing an entire topic while admitting every 10 minutes or so that I haven't successfully articulated the reason why I'm talking about this subject. I wouldn't put up with this if I was a listener. Seriously. Who should you write to? Keith will give you the address. It's 12:44.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:47. If you've got Simon Mark's withdrawal symptoms, he'll hopefully be with us tomorrow, but he also writes regularly for the I newspaper, which I think I'm going to start doing that as well, because I really like the I newspaper. He's got a great piece in today about Trump's sort of social media diarrhea over the course of the weekend, and it's not funny. I mean, it hasn't been funny for a long time, but he's boasting again about having passed tests that no other president... He actually wrote this: unlike other US presidents, none of whom have ever taken an approved high-difficulty cognitive test, I scored a perfect 30 out of 30, considered, quotes, extreme intelligence, end quotes. It's... this is my fourth such test, all perfect in capital letters, or 120 correct answers out of 120 questions asked, exclamation mark. It is rare that anyone gets a perfect score, especially when achieved 4 times in a row. And one of the things that's impenetrable about this sort of behaviour is that it's so obviously pathetic. And the question of why people go along with it or why people cheer it is one for the ages. Hannah Arendt wrote books about this before any of us even knew Donald Trump's name. But this desperation to prove his own power. It's not power, is it? This desperation to be something other than what he is. This desperation to achieve... I don't know, do you think he despises the people who revere him? Is he desperate to be revered by people who are clever and who do understand? Because I've never heard a better analysis of one element of his vanity than that given by the Democrat politician. There's a senator called John Ossoff, who this little clip of this speech popped up on my Blue Sky feed at the weekend, and I just thought, yeah, there it is. Of course that's what it is.
He's trying to put his face on the money. Did you see that? He's building a monument to himself. But see, Atlanta, he's doing these things now because no one will honor him when he's gone. Because he's a failed president and a national disgrace.
I'd keep an eye on that guy. He's got something going on, but that... Suddenly, of course, all of this stuff is about trying to convince himself that he's special. If he wasn't such a hideous human being, there'd be a tragedy to this process. He's trying to convince himself that he's special. If I put my face on a $250 note, will I actually feel special? If I build a statue of myself and stick it on the mall, will I actually feel special? Will I feel... What can I do to feel special? I'm going to boast about how well I've done in these weird tests that no one else has ever heard of. If I get 100, if I tell everyone I've got 120 out of 120, will I feel special? And he never feels special. The more people tell you how special they are, the more aching the chasm inside them must be about how inadequate they constantly feel, or how I mean, listen, boasting about real achievements is one thing. Boasting about invented achievements is absolutely tragic. And what is an invented achievement if not sticking your name on the Kennedy Center, or sticking your face on a dollar bill, or sticking social media claims about... It's desperately trying to convince himself that he's special. I love these moments of clarity. Understand that and you understand everything. A court's ruled that his name's got to come off the Kennedy Center. And as I'm reading that story, I'm thinking, Kennedy didn't put his name on the Kennedy Center. Kennedy wasn't trying to convince anybody that he was special. People decided he was special, so they stuck his name on the Kennedy Center. Understand this. Trump is trying to convince himself, against all the evidence, that he is special. Understand that, and you'll understand 50% of his more impenetrable behaviour. There it is. That's my gift to you at the beginning of this week. 12:51. What I haven't managed to give you so far is a deep understanding of my relationship with, I don't even know what to call them. Bob's in Carlisle. Are you going to help Bob, or are you going to make a bad situation worse?
Well, first-time caller, so a bit nervous.
Right, so it's only me. Don't worry.
Okay, fair enough. I think the answer really is looking again at the legislation and classification of all e-bikes and getting them all registered.
But are we convinced that they are the problem? I mean, you don't have many of them in Carlisle, do you?
Not many, no.
So
you do see them around. A lot of them are delivery bikes.
How do we know? How do we know that they're a problem? Why am I so convinced that they're a problem when I know nothing about roads and motoring and broader issues involved?
You probably see it as a problem because you see so many of them. You're down in London. I'm not. I'm up in the provinces. I mean, London is quite flat as well,
yes, that's
mostly,
true.
so it's easy to go around. It's a bit hillier up here. But the answer is, really, to stop you from being worried, is to get these bikes registered and plated. I mean, there is a method to get them all tested, and to get them approved and licensed.
How long would that take?
Well, I've done it. I've converted a couple of regular bikes and put 1,000-watt motors on them. And had
why?
Them tested.
Why have you done that?
Why? Because I'm a big fat bloke and I'm quite heavy and I've got a heart condition. I need a little bit of extra effort.
1,000 watts?
Yeah.
How fast does that go?
But I've limited them to 28 miles an hour, according to what the rules and regulations allow you to do. The thing is, in Europe, you have the standard e-bikes, 250 watts and 15.5 miles an hour, maximum speed. But you also have another category called an S pedelec or a speed pedelec, which is limited to 45 kilometres an hour or 28 miles an hour.
You know your stuff.
Up to 4 kilowatts of power.
Right.
Now, without this category, most of the bikes that you're concerned about fall into this category, which are over 250 watts.
Yeah.
And you can buy kits and you can buy them off Amazon already overpowered. Thing is, if they were registered and tested, the user would be accountable for their use.
So no, you're a genius.
So ANPR can pick up the numbers, right? So also the other big issue is that a lot of them are used in crime, and of course, if you can't see the number, people get away with it. If the bike enforcement is quite simple. If you have an e-bike, it doesn't have a number plate on it. You get fined.
I'm not so fussed about that. I tell you what you've done. You've actually nailed it for me, and I probably shouldn't have done a whole hour on it. I should have just got you on at the beginning. So, in and of themselves, they're not a problem, and most of the people I see are working very, very hard as delivery drivers. They just happen to be doing it on vehicles that are currently illegal. Your solution is just to make them not illegal and to make them properly regulated and properly registered, and then any potential problems. So I have gone off a bit of a deep end on this one because the people that I see are not the problem.
Correct.
It's a system that has. Hang on, because I want to squeeze something else in before the end of the show. How fast do you go on one that's got a 1,000-watt motor? I know you've limited it, but if you hadn't limited it, how fast could you go?
Not much faster because I'm a very heavy, fat bloke.
Don't stop saying that. You might be a heavy bloke, but you're making efforts to. Improve things.
It doesn't go much faster because a lot of it depends on the size of your wheels as well. I've got fairly small wheels on my bike, so it doesn't go that fast.
That's the other thing I get a bit upset about is those absolutely enormous wheels. So that makes the speed increase.
No, I'm talking diameter, not width.
I'm talking about the width of the tyres. What's the point of those really fat tyres that they have?
I don't see a lot of point in them either, to be honest. I mean, a lot of them puncture quite easily.
Well, do you want the good news or the bad news?
Go on.
The good news is that was a brilliant contribution to this conversation.
Thank you very much.
The bad news is that is absolutely the last time I'm ever going to be having this conversation.
That's a pity because I got a lot more on it.
Well, never say never, Bob. We'd never say never. 12:56 is the time. Should we squeeze in these climate change comments that I've been teasing now for about 3 days? So Richard Tice, who is, even by the standards of Nigel Farage's cronies, a ridiculous human being, asked on the question of climate change. Again, it all began with climate change. People think I exaggerate. All of the sort of populist or far right or whatever they're calling themselves this week, misogyny, racism and climate change denial. And the climate change denial is absolutely crucial to it for two reasons. Number one, the people that sponsor it are desperate to carry on making money out of climate change denial, as in fossil fuels, so they need to give the ordinary people other things to get angry about. Step in, racism and misogyny. But number two is that climate change denial was the mothership of misinformation, the mothership of fake news. Here is the assembled body of scientific evidence. On one hand, all the scientists agree about something, but let's treat some Herbert over there who doesn't know what day it is as if he is an equal and opposite force to the massed ranks of all of the world's scientists. And that's what happens when you put all of the world's science... Well, this is what happens when you put science in one corner and a blowhard with no knowledge in the other.
You can't present me with a whole load of graphs that I can't read, that may well be bullshit.
Okay.
Okay, and put this out there. So this terminates now. It's end of podcast. This is ridiculous.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You cannot seriously think this is a sensible way to conduct a podcast. We're not doing it. We're ending now.
All I'm saying is this is the summary for policymakers.
Yeah, and I don't agree with any of it. And you can't present something to me, right? And expect me to comment on it when I haven't read it. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of what you're presenting.
Right.
And one of the foundations of the IPCC's very ethos in the last 20 or 30 years, they've just abandoned.
This is sensational stuff. So here's the science. I don't understand any of that, so how dare you ask me questions about it? Gets better.
Your view on climate science, which is that thousands of scientists disagree that net zero is not the way to tackle climate change. Who are the scientists who are advising you on that? Can you name any, the thousands of scientists?
I've got lots of people advise me. I don't list all my private advisors with regard to anything, whether it's net zero, whether it's housing policy, whether it's industrial policy. People who advise me from all different sides, who are coming at me from all different angles, very often opposing, and that's great, because that's how you listen and learn. That's who we are.
That's lovely. Sometimes I think I'm exaggerating. Yeah, there's loads of scientists on my side. They just go to a different school. I can't even... How many times have I said to you, the way that you go after these people is just to ask them for details, ask them for examples. All the scientists are on my side. Okay, you just name one. You know what it reminds you of, right? It's the laws, isn't it? It's always the laws. Why do you want to leave the European Union? Because of all the laws we have to obey that I don't want to obey. Could you name one of those laws? All of them, James. All of them. Okay, then it will be really easy to just name one. Name one law, name one scientist, name one Thai-based billionaire who's given your boss £5 million that he didn't even tell you about. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinions. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from my LBC show every day. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.